All right, it says it's live on YouTube right now. Okay. So you can start, right? Okay, it's live.
Hello, good afternoon, welcome. I'm Joe Lark, the chairman of the Delaware County Board of Elections, with me today are Richard Byrne, one member, my fellow board members, and we call to order the October 21st, 2020 meeting of the Delaware County Board of Elections. We will start with the pledge of allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, with liberty and justice for all.
Good afternoon, we have a somewhat brief agenda this afternoon. All of our personnel is extremely busy, as you might imagine, with last minute preparation for the election. Mr. Savage, the supervisor of the voting machine warehouse, asked if he could be excused from the meeting today. He had no additional polling place changes. He did submit a brief written report this morning. He is at the warehouse in Chester and preparing the ballots and the materials. The ballots actually arrived this morning, so I thought that was appropriate rather than take several hours out of the meeting this day. He was available by telephone if we need him for anything. All of our personnel have been working extremely hard the last few days. They are going to give some reports later today with details of the work they have been doing. I don't want to steal the thunder, but we have mailed out a tremendous amount of ballots. We have a very small backlog. We have been receiving ballots and using that new equipment to log those in. I think we're all probably pleased to hear reports on the topic. Certainly we are thankful for their efforts, their hard work, their long hours. We've had a number of distractions, lawsuits, and obviously the public has a right to see requests from the court. That distracted everyone for a couple of days last week, but they still filtered on and have put in tremendous effort. We're very much thankful for that. So with that said, we will begin our agenda. I did receive a comment about this when I handled the public comments last week, and I allowed people to give public comment about additional topics in the agenda as opposed to limiting the comments only to items on the agenda. I was told that makes the meeting take longer. So today, if you would, if we have public comment on matters that we could vote on, if you could limit your comments to just the matter that we're there discussing at the time, rather than making comments about other matters that may appear in the room or general public comment. There's so much more interest in election this year than there has historically been. We've always been rather permissive in the scope of public comment and not really regulated it, but I was told it would be better to focus it so that you make the comments only with the matter that we're discussing at the time. Obviously, as the general public comment, you can make comments on anything, have questions about anything, just to move the debate forward in a lot of I have that question. I see somebody has risen. Do you have a comment?
Yes, do you have a copy of the agenda?
Do we have copies of the agenda available for distribution? We'll get your copy.
Thank you.
So first item is the review of the minutes. I know Mr. Byrne did it earlier, but he think that
yes, please. I took a look at the minutes from yesterday. I would ask that the amended to include, there was a complaint at the last meeting, I believe by Ms. Miller and perhaps the gentleman next to her, well, that they had witnessed some multiple ballots being deposited into ballot box downstairs, in the government center, and I think the board decided that that matter should be referred to the district attorney's office. That was not, as far as I can tell, not.
All right, so, Ms. Hagan, perhaps we could make that adjustment to the minutes, and then the next meeting we'll take a little on the minutes. Is there anything else I should for that? You don't- Okay, all right, very good. So that's how we'll handle that. We do have public comment next on our agenda. What we did at the last meeting was we took the public comment as it related to the matters in the document, and then we did general public comment at the end. Obviously, the same way, that's how we'll proceed. Next is old business. The first item is drop boxes, and like we discussed.
So I wanted to, I set up the pre-read last night to give all of you an update on where we are as of last week. I think last week I presented that we were having some issues getting the solar panels in, and we might be in a position to have to humanly staff some of the drop boxes. So I'm really happy to announce that as of Tuesday, 32 drop boxes went live. So we got all of the installations in that we had hoped. And the installation being the installation of the box, the pole, the router, the solar panel, and the camera. So those are all up and running. We started our ballot retrieval teams, picking up the ballots on Tuesday. I will give you an update that we have the 32 boxes that are up and running and collecting ballots. We currently have an additional 9 sites that are in the final stages of completion. We've had a number of municipalities come in just in the past few days wanting boxes installed. So we're working with them to make that happen. I think all the details of the installations and those timelines are included in the Excel spreadsheet that I set last night. The only site that would require, so part of the issue that we're in is we have 40 surveillance units, and we have 41 sites that wanted the drop box. So I think we were able to solve that for Chad's Ford by moving the installation inside. And we'll be working with, and so the public will have access to that drop box when the municipal building is open from 8 to 4:30. So we'll make sure that that is staffed appropriately. I put in the approximate cost there for us to do that. As you all know, these drop boxes are being monitored 24 hours a day by a singular parks police. And when I say singular, I mean that's all that person is doing while they're working. They're not looking at other park police issues. They're not looking at other monitors more broadly than the drop boxes. All they're doing is looking at the monitors that are surveilling the drop boxes. And so that is happening. The ballot retrieval teams came in on Monday. Currently, we have 2 teams of 2. We'll be going up to another team this coming Monday, but we have 2 teams of 2. I personally trained them on Monday. Their training included things like an overview and importance of the Dropbox project, review of their roles and responsibilities, a lot of time covering the chain of custody form, how to fill it out appropriately, guidelines for driving county. Finally, to ensure that they're seeing the same boxes every day in the same order at about the same time. So, Mr. Burton, I did put the names of the ballot retrieval teams in here. They are all furloughed, previously furloughed, they're now working again, which is good news. But they were furloughed employees of the Community Service Department, so they all are county employees. And I think they're very, very happy to be back to work. I also included a reiteration of the ballot return and collection plan. So yes, by Monday, we should have 41 boxes open, employed, and collecting ballots for Delaware County voters.
Thank you. I have one question. From looking at the material, so last week we had 32 or 33 municipalities we had heard from. And I think we asked the municipalities for input in August, like August 20th or 23rd. Is it the case that for 2 months we didn't hear from the difference between 33 and 41 is 8, more or less? You're probably correct me on the math, but why is it that there's 8 we never heard from until 2 months have gone by, and then in the last week suddenly we have this additional interest that we hadn't heard anything?
I think maybe word got out that even though we had ordered 50 drop boxes, we ordered 40 solar panels, and so it became a little bit of a competition and to see who was going to get a drop box. I mean, should anybody else come to us now, I think, our answer would be no, that, we're kind of at the limit of where we should go. But I think it became, people became aware that we only could have a certain number that we could install. And so, yes, people that have been maybe a little bit lax in getting back to us, or maybe not terribly speedy in getting back to us, became speedier. So I think that's the good news. And we've been trying to be very accommodating to everybody's request that we thought that we could thoughtfully and efficiently and safely do.
All right. Anybody else have any questions?
I do. With respect to the security at the sites, how are they lit? I mean, I see we have a solar panel and we have cameras, but what controls the lighting at the sites so that the cameras are able to see what's going on?
So we did, that was one of the stipulations of choosing the site at the municipality, Mr. Byrne, was we wanted it to be ADA accessible. We wanted it to be well lit, because if they're going to be accessible 24 hours a day, we wanted them to be safe. So those were some of the prerequisites that we sent out.
So who has the responsibility for making sure that they stay lit? Is it the municipality or is it us?
The municipality, when they selected the site, should have made a decision on where to put the drop box in a safe area.
I guess that's a little problematic to me in that what if one area is not lit well enough? Is the park police going to identify? Is there some measure that we can measure how lit the place has to be? Because if a municipality were to decide they didn't want to leave the light on all night, or they wanted to do less than what is optimal lighting with our cameras, how do we know that we're actually getting the feeds that we should be getting?
I haven't heard from Commissioner Mahoney about any location not being lit enough to be under surveillance. It's my
Commissioner Mahoney
assumption.
is the police commissioner. Commissioner Mahoney is the police commissioner.
Yes. It's my assumption that if, his officer on duty couldn't actually see the surveillance, that I'd be made aware of that. But I can absolutely formalize that.
Okay, yeah, I would like to check on that. The other question I have relates to the downstairs box as well. I had mentioned when I was trying to amend, or being allowed to amend the minutes from the meeting, that there were a couple complaints last week in that it was going to be sent over to Mr. Rouse to investigate. He was assigned by Mr. Attorney. So I thought that one of the conclusions that I know was one of the conclusions I got back from Mr. Rouse was that he personally spoke to folks at the county, and that there was going to be a man person at all times out front of the government center. And from your your memo last night, it doesn't seem like a whole lot has changed at the government center since last week. That is, we have a camera there, we have park police who are you know, taking people's temperatures and checking their bags and stuff to get in, but nobody directly watching the ballots.
Are you talking at the media borough or right downstairs?
Right downstairs, where we had the problems last week.
I would think if you walk down there right now, you'd see at least 1 or 2 people on literally sitting by those ballot boxes, watching.
From the election bureau or from the election board, where they're from?
They're employees of the county.
Do we assign them? That's what I'm asking you, because I
Yes.
thought your memo was different than what Mr. Rouse was requesting. Your memo had mentioned the park police again, that there were park police sitting there and watching. The memo I got from Mr. Rouse was different. The memo from Mr. Rouse said that he personally spoke to people at the election bureau, and someone from the election bureau would be assigned 24/7 to watch the box.
So, I don't believe that I said that in my memo last night. I think what I said in the memo.
No, you didn't. Mr. Rouse said it.
I think what I said in the memo is that anytime that the lobby downstairs where the ballot boxes are open to the public, we have at least 1 person planted on those boxes from the election bureau. And their sole job is to watch those boxes and ensure that people are not putting in more than a single ballot unless they have the appropriate authorization.
That's what I'm asking. There is a person from the election bureau,
Yes.
the whole time those boxes are accessible, watching. It's not just the park
Those
police.
boxes, excuse me, those boxes are not accessible 24 hours a day.
Okay, but
So at the end of hours open to the public, we take the ballot boxes, we put them back in the election bureau where they are locked. The ballot bags are taken out, they're sealed, they're put in a locked room. And once a day, the ballots are delivered to the election bureau at the ward, where all the chain of custody, I filled out the chain of custody personally, so.
I understand all that, but my question is, that the memo I got from Mr. Rouse said that there would be somebody from the election bureau. When I read your memo last night, and maybe I'm wrong, maybe you can show me where I'm wrong in the memo, but I thought you said that the person that was guarding the box was the park police. And that was the same situation we had last week, where there were at least 3 or 4 different instances that were caught on tape, of people putting multiple ballots in. So my concern is that even though we reported to the DA and, you know, he didn't dispute that there were people dropping more than 1 ballot in a box. But he said in his memo to me, to the board, that he personally met with the people from the county and that someone from the election board would be there all the time watching. And that's my simple question to you is there somebody that we're assigning from the election bureau to watch the box? So there's not multiple ballots?
Yes,
Or, let me finish, or are those people the park police?
they are not the park police, they are from the election bureau. The park police, so the 2 ballot boxes are right here, the park police are right there behind the counter, so they're within purview of the park police. However, they do not have a singular person monitoring those boxes. The election bureau does. So if the 2 ballot boxes are right here, they have a seat. They're either standing or sitting right on the ballot boxes.
Okay,
And
that's a fact.
they're giving guidance to voters that they cannot submit more than 1 without the appropriate.
Okay, and have they had any reports of anybody putting in more than 1? How long have they been there?
Since this came to our attention last week,
Okay, has there been any more reports of anybody putting in more than 1 ballot since then?
not that I understand, not that it's come to my attention.
Is there somebody that person that's sitting here has a, you know, a duty to report to, so that we would know if there were more than 1?
I'm thinking that since they're right on the ballot boxes, that people are not putting in more than 1. I mean, I personally have stood there and watched what they're saying to people. And there's some people that get a little bit angry, but so be it. But it's my thought that if they were to see somebody put in more than 1, that they would report that.
They're told to report to somebody, I hope, right?
I don't know that they've been told to report to somebody, because my assumption is that because that they are standing or sitting right there, that somebody should not be putting in more than one.
Well, let's just, tell them that if somebody does put in more than one, then to bring it to your attention. Okay?
I
Well,
think it's
if
fair
I
to
can
assume
clarify,
that
these
they're-
people's jobs is to prevent that from happening,
Correct.
not to stand by and document it.
Right?
Right, but
Okay.
if there's a deviation from that, my assumption
I
is they
mean-
would report it because their duty was to watch for that.
Correct,
But let's just make
there's
it
no
clear.
report of somebody ignoring what the direction of the staff was, don't drop more than one ballot, and dropping more than one ballot anyway. Now, if that were to happen, I think it would be self-evident that they would then report that out to change.
You would think
I
so.
have not received such a report, and if that needs to be clarified, we can.
Yeah, that's all I'm asking. I mean,
This is the language from the pre-read on this topic. The ballot boxes in the media voter service center are being monitored by county employees during all hours the center is open to the public. And then goes on from there.
Right. Right, but it doesn't say somebody from the election board bureau, which is what the district attorney's memo said. And what I am worried about is that a county employee could be a part police officer.
Well,
So
those county employees
let me
are,
finish, please, let me finish. So what I want to make sure is that we have some different situation than we had last week.
we do.
And then the second part of that was, what are these folks doing other than sitting there? And the answer that I just got was, I'm not sure if they've been told to make a report or not. So it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, like you said, for them to just be sitting there and not doing anything. So I'd like to get some kind of report back as to whether we're doing a good job in keeping people from putting in multiple ballots, or we're just giving somebody the ability to sit at the chair for
All right, okay, I just have a couple questions. The persons are instructed to tell people and to not permit them to put in more than one, correct?
That is correct.
And to date, you haven't had any reports of problems other than people complaining that they've been told not to put in more than one, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, is there any other comment on this?
Now, I do have a question about the Chad's Ford.
Okay,
Chad's Ford, now, as I understand, is going to have a drop box, is that right?
That's correct.
And that drop box is going to be manned
That's correct.
and not accessible to people at nighttime, is that right?
That is correct.
And I guess maybe this is directed to you, ma'am. I mean, does that cause any concern as to whether there's disparate treatment going on with respect, because there's some candidates that would be in Chester where we have 2 and 3 and pop-up sites that are allowed to vote all night long and allowed to vote, on weekends. But then there are, you come out to Chad's Ford and we have a box that is manned and is only available during work hours. I mean, that to me doesn't seem fair, especially since there are some candidates that cover both of those areas.
So, Mike, there is no concern about that, because any county voter can drop a ballot in any county drop box.
I understand that, but
So any
you
county
don't think
voter
it's,
can vote 24 hours a day in any of the 24-hour drop boxes.
it just doesn't seem fair to me that people from Chester or other areas have 2 or 3 alternatives that they can go to all day long. And a guy from Chad's Ford's gonna drive all the way to Chester or some other place to get to an open box.
My understanding
doesn't
from
seem fair.
talking with the person who's coordinating the installations is that Chad's Ford requested that the box be inside the building. The building is locked when the building is not open. So that's at the request of the municipality.
I get that, but our job is to make sure that this is a fair election, and, we don't have to succumb to what the townships of the municipality say. I mean, it's gotta be fair, it's gotta be open, so it would seem to me that we should have the same opportunities for the people in Chad's Ford as we have for the people in, the other areas of the county.
That may be something that people of Chad's Ford should take up with their officials.
Well, it's something that I find concerning myself, so, you don't think there's any problem with that at all?
all right, anything else? Okay, so we can move on to the next item? Yes, ma'am.
Would this be the appropriate time for public comments about the drop boxes?
I don't see that it would be appropriate because there's no motion.
Yeah, we usually take it when the board is about to take action.
All right, thank you.
Well, obviously, we can do this at the general public comment. You can
Sure.
comment.
Thank you.
Ms. Jackson?
I think so, just to continue, Mr. Burns had also requested a thorough review of the security at both the voter service centers and the mobile voter service center that was at Subaru Park this past weekend. So I provided some details about the level of security that has occurred and continues to occur at those locations. You also requested the names of people that worked at Subaru Park this weekend. I included that as well. Those people that were operators, the processors on the Sure equipment, those people that were greeters, those were all included in here.
So, thank you, I did get that, you said that to me about 9:30 last night, I appreciate it. I'm sorry. So,
I want to question you. I have a concern, and I understand we can discuss the security of this. The President's Protective Detail, when we put out the security plan, so to the extent we can discuss it without being too particular, we don't want to necessarily tell the world all the things that we do, and perhaps be susceptible to some kind of.
no, we're not, I'm
concerned.
not just concerned about the things we do as things we don't do.
Okay.
We're not worried about it.
Well, my question, Mr. Chairman, that should be an executive session. I mean, that is what we go into is also potentially something to do. If there's a security risk, we're talking about it, we're announcing to the public, or Mr. Byrne is making implications, there's something that should be done for security purposes, it's not being done. That's a gap, and now we're being.
But it's for the protection of all the people in this room.
That's
So,
fine,
I
but
think
it's
they
an
can hear, and
opportunity
I
for.
don't understand what the secrecy is on that, what would make it privileged.
Why don't we have a discussion with council just to determine whether this is not trying to issue or not? Okay, let's do that. We can do it. We'll be back.
So it's conversation around the drop box from the better place. So it's okay. That drop box, it's under 24-hour guards. In front of the polling place. And Marcus Hill. They turn around, and like all four municipalities, all four boards under one roof. And they're in the community center, and then find the center. Okay, so election day, things get quiet. The state comes, so that, and then I down, they start going crazy.
All right, we are back in session, and you determined that the discussion is going to be about what took place historically at Subaru Park. So disclosing future security issues won't be an issue. Have a public discussion, okay? Go ahead.
Thank you. So, yeah, so like you said, last night you provided a list of people that were in Subaru Park as operators and greeters, I believe. Were any other greeters at Subaru Park that were not on this list?
Not that I know of.
What did you have to do to qualify to become a greeter?
The people that are on this list are people that have been working with us in the election bureau for the past few months, helping us either process ballots, mail-in ballot applications through the Sure system, working at one of the voter service centers, but several people that, are familiar with our processes and, were willing to work this weekend.
So this actual setup was within the concourse of the stadium, is that right? The hallways of the stadium?
I don't know what you call the exact area. You enter through the premier orthopedic gate, you have a little bit of a walk. We had greeters, meaning there were tables where the greeters were, where the voters would come up, they would get their instructions on, you know, whether they had a voter registration issue, whether they had they wanted to get their mail-in ballot application. There were places for voters to fill out their forms, they take them back to a greeter, the greeter would then run them back to a processor would hand the ballot back to the greeter, so.
Yeah, there we bought a whole bunch of those stickers, right, that said I voted, and they were being given out as well, right?
We never purchased those stickers, Mr. Byrne.
Yes.
No,
Was there anybody there giving stickers to people?
there was somebody, I think, who brought some stickers.
Was it a candidate?
No, not to my knowledge.
There was no candidate at the park over the 3 days?
I wouldn't have voted there, Mr. Burns, at Hilton. I got a sticker from Ms. Winterbottom. She showed me they were there, and I got one.
Did you see any candidate?
Not in the building, no. There was a candidate outside, all the way outside of the entrance to the park. I did see a candidate.
And who did you see?
I said, I saw Congresswoman Scanlon.
And were any of the Republicans invited to go there, or were they denied?
I don't think anybody was invited. I think that she was there. I don't know. I can't speak to her intentionality, but she was outside the park in the public area.
You don't know. You don't know anybody. Denied.
Well, why don't we ask, Ms. Jackson, did we invite any candidates to attend this event?
Not to my knowledge.
Ms. Jackson, did we discourage any candidates from attending this event?
No,
Okay,
no.
that's what.
About Mr. Parks or any of our lawyers? Not just you.
Same question?
Yeah.
My
Anybody
one
from
did
the
not
Trump
invite
campaign or anybody else?
candidates, we did not discourage any candidates.
Was anybody from the Trump campaign or the local political parties told that they could not have readers at the site?
Not by me, and no such question came to me.
Do you know by anybody else?
I'm not aware of any such question being raised or by anyone.
Was it discussed?
I don't recall it being discussed. No, I don't think it was issued. It was not an issue. I gave directives to the park police as to what their duties were, which included making sure no one blocked the entrance to the event or disrupted it. That was the only instruction that I gave, and I didn't get any response back that any disruptions took place.
It was Senator Clay there as well?
I saw a newspaper article that said he was. I wasn't there though.
That's all right.
Okay, next item on the agenda. I don't know if we did 3 with 2 or like something separate.
If I could suggest, I think the problem is
Okay, all right,
I agree.
all right, so that closes the old business, new business. Item 1, it's usually something Ms. Hagan, asked for, is the authority to make temporary, appointments or emergency appointments rather for the elections. Is that you today, Ms. Hagan?
No, it is not.
Yeah, I asked for that to be included, although I did that because I understand that that's something that's typically done. And I have asked for this as it's done in all prior years, to my knowledge at least, because the board has the ability to make emergency appointments, and the practice is to delegate that authority to someone in the Board of Election staff, and in the past it has been Hagan. We now have somebody on the team, Christina Icona, specifically dedicated to overseeing matters related to the local election board, where gaps exist, and those types of issues. So I think because she is the person specifically tasked with that responsibility, it would make most sense to delegate that authority to her. But that's simply my recommendation.
No, I think the distinction is we have traditionally, so the public can understand, I feel like confused places. So, when there's a vacancy that occurs in a local election board within 7 days of the election,
5 if
to 5 days of the election, the Board of Elections makes an appointment to fill that position. And it's, those of you I can see in the audience with experience know there's, this happens often, and typically the political parties and other community groups work to help identify the people they submit the names to the second appointment for the election. It doesn't have a meeting every day to make these appointments. So we delegate that responsibility, if you will, to Ms. Hagan. So I think Mr. Hart is actually suggesting that rather than Ms. Hagan have that responsibility, that it be delegated to Ms. Iacona.
Yes, that's exactly.
Since Ms.
Same exact process, just because Ms. Hagan is not overseeing that directly now, but she's got 2 tons of stuff on a 1 ton plate right now. That, you know, the person who's specifically responsible for have to be the person delegated to that authority. Otherwise, it would be Ms. Hagan who would then have to oversee the person doing it and just puts another thing on her.
Yeah, so the-
The motion made second.
So, Mr. Parks, isn't this really a matter to set out the election code as a process, how to do this? I mean, as I understand from the election code, what would happen would be up to like 5 days before the election, you could file an appointment with the Court of Common Pleas and make a decision as to who will fill the spot.
That's correct, and they've had a series
And that would
of-
be, okay, and that would be noticed to, and that would be with notice to the local election officials who really are, you know, it's a local thing. It's the idea of these election boards are elected locally, and they should have their say in the process. So the law says you can do that up to 5 days before, and then after 5 days, if it's between the 5 days and the 7 o'clock, or the 7 o'clock in the morning, we can have a poll, what do you call it? Curbside.
You know, you have to call curbside on election day morning.
Yeah,
First
so-
person showed up by 6:30 a.m.
So, I mean, I've been, and it's no secret, I've been very troubled with, we're going too far in collecting people, to be poll workers that, you know, it's taking away the, authority of the local people or the obligations of the local people. So why would we do this? I mean, why don't we just follow what the law is?
We are following exactly what the law is. What the law says is that if the local people want to fill a gap, they can fill that gap, and there's a process to do that, and they're actively doing that. We've had 3 sets of hearings before the court so far in this election season for those appointments. And what the law then provides is if by 5 days out, the local people haven't filled the hole, somebody's got to fill the hole, and that somebody is the board. And the only reason you have a curbside is if somebody who's supposed to show up that morning doesn't show up.
I understand.
Look, that's very possible in the COVID era, somebody who wake up with a fake temperature or COVID symptoms, and, you know, we'll have to deal with that on that morning.
I
just put a mechanism in
And maybe I'm
place.
misunderstanding what you're asking, okay?
Okay.
And it would seem to me that up until the 5 days, we would still follow the normal process.
Absolutely.
Nobody would be selected, except the Court of Common Pleas,
Absolutely.
notice to the local.
Correct.
And then it's just this 5-day period.
Correct. All I'm asking is, the code says the board does even more than the appointment for 5 days to election day morning.
Okay.
And unless you guys want to meet every day to do that, which I know some shakes of the head, and historically to avoid that,
Yeah.
that was right, or responsibility of the board is delegated to a board staff member.
Okay.
And
I
board
guess,
staff
I was,
member-
maybe I have to be honest. I thought you were talking about from today forward.
No, this would be just 5 days in.
Thank
It's
you.
a simple delegation question, and it's procedural, not substantive.
Okay, okay. Yeah, all right.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. The motion carries. Item 2, is that also you, Mr. Parker?
It is.
You know what, Mr. Burke pointed out, we took a vote, we didn't have public comment. Does anybody have public comment on that? Okay, next item.
Yeah, so the next item is also something that has been traditionally done. In fact, the board did it in the primary, and it's another delegation process. Again, this is not substantive, it's procedural. And this relates to delegating, its authority, the board's authority to election staff, the board election staff, to make determinations required during the pre-canvass and canvass process. So these would be, the board is charged under the code to make certain examinations of absentee and mail-in ballots, for example. And historically, what this board has done is delegate to Ms. Hagan and the staff of the board the ability to make those determinations in consultation with the solicitor, and then come back for matters for ultimately for board approval on things after the fact, should there be any questionable cases. That, as you recall, is how we proceeded in the primary. And again, this is a procedural matter so that the board doesn't have to show up on election day morning and for the ongoing 24/7 canvass that takes place thereafter and make these determinations itself.
Under the board could, the three of us confirm 150,000 plus ballots.
So that's why delegation is done.
So, we have a motion.
I think we should ask the public comment.
We will.
Second. So, just so everybody understands, what this means, when you literally read the code, it says that the Board of Elections shall take the returns and perform the canvass. As a practical matter, I happen to say every county, but certainly in all the counties around here, we have to delegate that to the staff because 3 people can't inspect 175,000 mail-in ballots, or the number we get. 3 people, if 3 of us don't run each ballot through the scanner, the same as, Carmen and Jim and I didn't go down to the warehouse and open up the back of the mechanical machine to write down all the numbers off the back of the machine. Staff writes those numbers down, accumulates them, and they give us a report. We oversee it and approve it, and if there's issues, they come to us with the issues and we make determinations. So what this is a procedural motion to delegate the canvassing and the pre-canvassing process to the staff. It's the usual customary thing that we've always done. So, Mr. Burnett, we take public comment on the motion. If there is public comment, we're willing to listen.
So for the pre-canvassing and the
I'm sorry,
canvassing,
I know you're known to everybody, but I think there were some issues when the minutes were being taken, so they clearly know who's speaking.
Carol Miller, 218 Cal Road, Springfield. So when they're doing the pre-canvass and the canvassing, are we permitted to have watchers?
That is not germane to the motion, but the answer is that the code contemplates that each campaign and each party is entitled to have an observer present for the pre-canvass and the canvass, yes.
And that starts at 7 a.m. on election day?
Yes, there's been a notice that's been issued, and I believe provided to the parties already on that.
All right, there being no other comment, we don't have any discussion on this. All those in favor say aye. Aye. So that motion carries. All right, item 3.
I added this to the agenda as well, although did so in consultation with Ms. Hagan. Apparently, the Blue Crest equipment that we now have has the technological capability of being able to measure the thickness of a returned ballot envelope and determine if that envelope is beyond a certain measure of thinness. If it is too thin, that would suggest that there is a naked ballot inside, that ballot would count. So the question would be, I believe it's appropriate for this board to determine whether, just like to activate the overvote or undervote on the scanners in the polling places, to activate this technology. And if you were to activate this technology to attempt to discern using technology, not human beings holding these things up to the light or trying to tell us anything, but just a technological scan of the thickness of the ballot, if it comes out as too thin, the proposal would be that we would notify people who send in these ballots that are potential naked ballots, give them an opportunity to come in, correct that issue. So that's, if you're not going to give the person an opportunity to come in and correct the issue, then there's no point in turning on the technology. But we do have this technological capability, and, you know, whether to turn it on and activate it to give folks a chance to try to fix these issues or potential issues before, before their vote's rejected is a matter of policy.
Let me ask a couple of questions about this technology. So when we get the ballot back and they're scanned, if were to be set up that it was too late, it would not be then marked in the short system as a received ballot, or it would be?
My understanding, I'll defer to Ms. Hagan on this, I believe it is still marked as received, because we received it. But we would then, we have a proposal that we've developed, if the board were to approve this, that would create a notice letter going to that voter, email, if we have their email, saying, our technology detected the ballot you sent back in is of a certain degree of thickness that suggests that maybe you need a ballot. And if you'd like to come in and try to fix that, here's where to come, here's the deadline.
Is there anything in the law that contemplates that?
There is nothing in the law, one way or the other, the law is silent on it. This is why it's a matter of policy for the board.
Okay. The proposal you're talking about, is it a proposal to tell me more about the proposal, you say send it out,
No, the proposal is to activate the technology,
activate the
turn
technology?
on the feature.
Okay.
Just like you turn on the overvote, undervote, or turn it off when you're talking about the scan. The technological feature capacity that this new technology is, this new equipment we have, has.
When we're looking at the envelope that comes in, right, and say this is too much, does that, are we able to identify who the voter is at that point in time?
Yes, because it's still in the outer envelope, there's a declaration on the back, and there's a return address from the voter on the front.
So does our proposal have some system that makes sure that we're contacting everybody that this happens to, as opposed to, a particular party?
Well, the answer is yes, which is if the rule is going to be that every ballot, the rule would be that every ballot identified by the equipment as potentially a naked ballot because it was measured to be too thin, that every voter who's voted that a ballot like that would get the notice. And there's no party element.
How would we have their phone number or their email?
We wouldn't have their phone number, and none of this involves calling anyone. There are two options. We would either have their email address, because some people have registered through the sewer system, and they have their email address on file if they apply to that mail-in ballot online. Or if we don't have that, we would have to send them a paper letter. It's the only other alternative.
And do we know what the paper letter is going to say yet?
Yes, I've read it.
Look at what potentially says.
The basic, I will summarize it. It says, our technology has, have we received your ballot? Our technology has identified that your ballot is of a thinness that suggests it may contain, or that your envelope is of a thinness that suggests it may contain a naked ballot. And if it is a naked ballot, it won't be counted.
Have you seen anybody do this?
I know that Allegheny County is doing it. I was told they've already sent 500 such letters. And I was told
That's the only place that you know?
that's the only place I know of, but that doesn't mean that's the only place that's doing it. That's just, I have to be talking to Allegheny County solicitor.
And where are we on the status of, I know for a while we were way behind on things. I mean, we're catching up, but I mean, isn't this going to put another level of work on an already overstaffed election bureau?
Well, I'm not sure what you mean by way behind. One thing I'm aware that was behind her was our scanning in of ballots we received back from voters. But that was a technological issue, which I believe that subsequently been sorted out. So that's the only item that I'm aware of that we were behind other counties, and that has been resolved as of a couple of days ago. So I don't, if you're talking about something else, good luck. That's the one thing.
Well, I'm talking about the whole system. If you come here, coming here since January, you're how overworked we are, how far behind we get. We just keep adding more work to an already overworked system. I see letters all the time that the staff are saying you're 12 hours, 13 hours, that you're on weekends. I don't know why 14 days before the election, with all the complaints that people have about mail being slow and that, why we would add another layer onto that.
3 Republicans got their letter and got it back and fixed it, but 3 Democrats didn't. I mean, it just seems to me like it's just an invitation for more of a mess than we really need to handle at this point. There's no requirement for law to do it, and there's only one county up in Allegheny County that is doing it. I mean, it seems to me like it's just an invitation for trouble.
Well, just to be clear, I don't know that there's only one county in the Commonwealth doing it. I am certain that Allegheny County is doing it, but that, I haven't done a survey of any other counties. It just happens to be somebody I'm talking to who mentioned it. Number 2, I have had discussions with those who are overseeing the staff about the practicalities of being able to do this with the staffing level available. And I understand that this is doable from the staff perspective. To your question,
Who do you
about,
talk to about that?
Maureen and I have discussed that. Mary Ann and I have discussed that.
You said that Allegheny County is already doing it?
Yeah.
Okay, and they're doing it as they, I assume, scan in the ballots?
That's
Say
the
that
thing
they-
about, yeah.
So how would we contemplate the ones that have already been scanned and being, handled in this way?
I think we'd have to probably run those back through the second business, unless that's already been flagged.
No, that is possible to do. The first several thousand that we have had before the Bluecrest sorter was up and running for us, we recorded it directly through Shore. But we can now put it in through the Bluecrest sorter, and rather than have it scan, which is going to take you the barcode image to give the voter credit, we can just put it in sort mode, and then it would be able to do the measure and put it into the appropriate batches.
Thank you. And what is, in terms of the period, I assume there has to be a period.
There is the cure period my cure period I'm recommending would be coextensive to the period that a voter who shows up at election day without an ID, who's an ID required voter, has to cure that ballot, which is by 5 p.m. Monday following the election day. So that voter would have the same cure rights as a voter who was identified as having a potentially naked ballot. And the basis for that rationale is a federal court ruling out of the Southern District of Indiana, where the court found that the fact that there was an ID cure opportunity under the Indiana voter law meant that a person who had potentially defective mail-in ballot should have the same cure opportunity.
And just, I do think it would be helpful to understand, I mean, this is an interesting proposition, I think it would be helpful, and the law has changed this to make it balance, and so I'm concerned that voters of both parties will not have their ballots counted for, sort of a lack of understanding of how to fill out a mail ballot. I do think it would be helpful to understand where we are in scanning, and because I do know that there was a technological issue that has been resolved about the scanning and about the receipt, but I don't want to see people worried that their ballot hasn't been received because they haven't had notification, and then suddenly file for a replacement ballot or other thing and create actually some issues for the staff that are different from what Mr. Parks was talking about. So I think it's helpful if the chairman could understand
Yeah,
how we're doing on that.
Second, well, you're gonna report on that later, maybe you could just let us know now what those numbers are, where we stand, and I know you sent it to us, everybody, you know, I think.
Yes, as of last night, we had processed, approved 139,150 applications for ballots for the November election. As of last night, we had made files to release ballots. The last 9,000 of these will go out on Friday. So we have now sent out 136,921 ballots to voters. And with the return ballots, we have 19,911. And as I left the office today, we had our files of what was reported in through the sorter yesterday, and that was another, I believe, 18,000 ballots that will be reported in by Wednesday today.
Is that on top of the 19,000?
I apologize.
Sorry, is that on top of the 19,000?
Yes, so that 19,911 are already in. We're going to be adding an additional number, it's estimated to be 18,000 going in today.
outgoing mail. We've gotten 139,000 more or less requests, and we've mailed as of tomorrow, because we have things prepared to go out in the mail tomorrow, 136,000. So we have about 3,000 that we're behind, if you will, or 3,000 that haven't gone out yet out of 139,000.
That have been approved. We have many that were not approved, or were due, yes, many reasons it might not have been sufficient. 139,150 have been approved. 136,921 by end of day tomorrow will be set to mail.
Okay, so to the extent people want to talk about, they use the word backlog or whatever, kind of unfair, because it obviously takes time to get things out the door, but of the valid requests, 139,000 valid requests to date, there's only 3,000 haven't been mailed out yet, so, and that is a day's work. I would
agree, and the backlog that has been referenced before, the hard copy applications, was the paper that comes into the office. We are current on those. We have 1,400 even mail yesterday. That's what the staff is working on today. As far as the online applications, we are, don't have that number directly in my head, but it was just over 6,000, 6,500 that are online applications. And those were current through, I think they were only about 2 weeks old as far as those applications that are online. So we have been able to increase our numbers of staff the last few days. So that backlog is, they're not coming out. They're doing a great job. They are working long hours. They're tuned out to it, but they take quite seriously the responsibility to move this as best they can and get the voters the opportunity to have their vote count.
And now let me ask you this, and both my colleagues here are better trial lawyers than me, so they may not ask you this question, but because I don't know the answer to it. But looking forward, and I know it's guessing, and a million things could happen, but looking forward, it would certainly seem to me, and I was wondering your opinion, does it look as if we will be able to send ballots out relatively contemporaneous within a day or two of the request and get people their mail ballots out? What about the deadline?
Yes, so the deadline to apply is next Tuesday, so obviously I can't foresee exactly what the incoming looks like in the next several days, but with a smaller backlog than we have had over the last probably 6 weeks or longer even, it is, I feel we're in much better shape right now to get them out by, I think, 3 days post
3 days
application in 2 days.
Or by Thursday, right? Tuesday's the last day, and we have to go out by Thursday. Right? It would certainly seem to me from what you reported, and I guess consistent with your understanding, that we'll meet that deadline, absent some catastrophe in the next 10 days. Perfect. Okay. Now let's talk for a moment about the recording of ballots received back. I think anybody who looked at the numbers last week and saw we had, I forget exactly, 3,000 or some relatively small number recorded was scratching their heads, knowing there seems to be a lot of mail down there. And the issue is that the electronic equipment wasn't fully functional. And now this week you've gotten that equipment to be functional, and in 2 days you've recorded about 18,000 ballots a day. And based on the mail that you see down there, you think by the end of the week you'll be current on that, correct?
Yes, we are. To be clear, I don't want to discourage Blue Cross in any way, but they've been a good partner to us so far, and their equipment is making a huge difference in our workload. But it wasn't that anything was not functioning. It was we were still completing the training and setup of the processes. So as soon as we started running all that through, that it would be up and going in an orderly manner. So we were able to complete that. We had our first batch go through, as I said, Monday, and then get those files and get that up into the state shore system. The system doesn't automatically populate those files. It creates files for us that we then take and then upload to unique batches into the shore system. So it is time consuming, but certainly many times less than it was sitting and scanning each individual ballot up into the shore system.
And again, assuming you can continue to use the equipment at the same level that it's worked the last few days, and I didn't mean to imply that it was somehow, when I said not functioning, it was broken. It was not turned on yet, essentially, because it's new and we had to hook it up and train people, et now that the equipment is working and functioning, assuming we catch up with the, scanning everything in by the end of the week, then the shore system updates, there's a slight lag while the shore system updates. When would people be able to check and make sure in the shore system that if they mailed a ballot, say, a month ago, that we have it?
Each batch that we reported as having been received, the voted ballots, once we start reporting that into Shore, they should be able to see that within a matter of 10 to 15 minutes.
Okay, so over this weekend, the system should reflect everything we received through close of business Friday, if people wanted to check. Okay, so I guess what we can do is we can tell people, obviously, if you mail your ballot today, we might not have it yet and have it scanned in, but if you mailed your ballot a week ago, or 2 weeks ago, or 3 weeks ago, or a month ago, by this weekend, you can check if we have it, and probably at least 100,000 people will show up that we received your ballot back, and you know that we have it. I see hands for public comment, but, yeah, I don't think we're at that point yet. Ms. Jackson, did you want to say something a few moments ago? I thought you were trying to get my.
No, I'm actually here. I just want to go on the record as when, Solicitor Parks and I had that conversation, it's my understanding that we had to do, the request, that we were going to do the state mandate. So it wasn't, when I said, yes, we can do that, that was based upon understanding that it was the state mandate, not necessarily.
You're talking about the sending this notice.
Yes, sending the letters,
For those not following, we're not talking about the motion now.
sorry.
Mr. Byrne and I, this time, and Ms. Townsend. So now let me ask you this then. Is it your opinion that this is something we have the capacity to do if we're not required to do it? Or would you think it's something that could infringe on our other work if we were to do this?
Are you asking me, Chairman?
Yeah.
If you decide that we need to do this, we can absolutely comply with that. From my perspective, so much of the process of what we're doing this year is new. We have new equipment, we have new processes, that shouldn't scare anybody because, I feel very confident that we'll get through that. But my preference would be that we focus on the essentials. I'm not sure that since we haven't done this in the past, I would consider this an essential. So my preference would be that we not add one more thing to the plate of things that we're already, that we need to do and do well. But that's certainly your decision.
I heard what you're saying.
Yeah,
Yes.
well, I guess we have just, Ms. Jackson, we haven't done it before, but we haven't had the same ruling from the courts regarding the naked ballot, so it hasn't been an issue, and voters didn't feel that if they made that mistake, their vote was counted if they met all the other requirements. But I do have some process questions, to follow up on your concern, and I think maybe they're for Ms. Hagan, but I think they're for you as well, please feel free to answer. Ms. Hagan, just in terms of what would happen, are you now, let's say we vote to turn this way on, does it should, how do you retrieve the ballots that have this issue or are aware that voter would need to be contacted? Let me start actually with the first question. Would you turn it on for the remainder of the ballots now being scanned initially as in and received, since that's the capability? Is that the recommendation?
Yes, we can.
So let's say there's
Previously to that level.
let's say there's another, I don't know, we've got 37,000 that are done already. Let's say we have another 30,000. What happens with the ones that have the naked ballot issue?
The system is making an assumption based on weight. If you take the ballot that is issued in the proper format with the ballot, the secrecy envelope, and the return envelope, it will measure that.
I know, I'm sorry, my question may have been ill formed. If once that assumption is made and we find a naked ballot in a batch, what happens?
We will put it into a pocket. There is a component of it that has 72 trays. And the trays are assigned either to certain locations or certain functions, one of which are items that are defective. No signature on the envelope, or that if you choose to say that it is too thick, so that it is possible that this is an issue ballot. But that would be separate from the one that has a signature.
Okay, so they will go into their own pocket.
Yes.
Okay. And then that would be done up front for the remainder that have been received, assuming the staff would just go with me on that assumption. And then we still have, I don't like calling it a backlog because, you know, it's not right. We need to process another, who knows how many more. I don't know if you have an estimate of how many have received, but I assume it's a lot that has yet to be sent, which is good news. But let's say we run those through, and I think you said by end of day tomorrow we'll be caught up, but Mr. Lawrence, the chairman, gave you a little to the end of the week, but pretty soon we'll be caught up.
Yes.
And then on the go forward for any ballots received, we will no longer have that, so you'll only be doing, I assume, the days mail and days collection of mail-in ballots each day. And then what is contemplated for when you would do the ones that are not have been done, but have been scanned and is received already? So the first 32,000, or sorry, I'm adding 1100, 19 and 18,000. When would you do those?
To read,
You'd have to weigh them, right? You said you could do it without rescanning them, so they won't be marked as voted twice, but you have to reweigh them.
you could run those through over the weekend, Saturday or Sunday to see, it was amazingly not that machine could run through 39,000 in less than an hour. It's remarkable that.
That's great. And then when they all end up in the special pocket, the ones with naked ballots, and there will be, I mean, nobody's naive to think there won't be naked ballots, right? I don't know if we can estimate how many there will be, right, at this point.
In my past history over the years, it's not uncommon for somebody to not put it inside the envelope.
Although there have been new education campaigns. Right. What is then contemplated will happen with that pocket full of potentially naked ballots?
If the board approves, and what Mr. Parks and I have discussed is that we will identify the voter and either email and or then send a letter to that voter of possibility. Because obviously we can't say with certainty that this is the situation. We're going by a statistical assumption that it didn't mean a certain way, so it may not have that sequence schedule. So we'll notify them, give them their time if they wish to come in and hear that, and then we will have that ballot that has been put into a possible rejection level. I mean, we can't make that final decision until election day, but we would then marry that to their application so that it is kept and not putting forward to be counted, only the one that they were stored would be counted.
And who would be, just because I think Mr. Vernon raised it, Mr. Lexington has, Mr. Jackson raised it, who would be the people who would be able to be assigned to do that? That does sound like a very serious process.
Assigned to do the letters or
Right, assigned to do the communications to the
the staff at the board would be the ones going through those and sending the letters out and notifying the voters possibility of the deficiency in there.
and is there staff sufficient community to do that as well?
If the numbers stay where they are, it certainly will be a big reach, but I think it is an important reach to give everybody an opportunity to know their ballot. They have an issue. Certainly there's been a lot of attention to the importance of this election, and I think it's fair to let everybody know if we have the ability to see something wrong with their ballot. Is it a big ask? Yes, it is. But do I think it's an important ask? Yes, it is.
scenario of somebody who's had the right to vote a provisional ballot on election day at the polling place, but they didn't bring their ID and it turned out they needed one. Just let's say they were a first-time voter at that polling place. They have until the following Monday at 5 p.m. to show up with an ID in our office. They haven't voted a ballot after the deadline, but their ballot hasn't been activated, if you want to think about it that way, until they come in with that ID, and they have until Tuesday or Monday after election day to do it. This is the same thing. And that's what the Federal Court of Southern District of Indiana looked at for its analysis. It makes sense to me. Second of all, if you don't have it be after election day, substantially after election day, the following Monday is why I picked that, because that's the ID fix deadline. Then you run into a potential equal protection problem. Because somebody under the current law of Pennsylvania has just addressed by the U.S. Supreme Court and has previously addressed by the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, walks into a post office at 7:45 p.m. on Tuesday election day, gets their ballot, timestamp, drops it in the slot. That shows up at our office on Friday morning. We run it through the scanner, too thin. Well, that person, if you don't have the mature date after then that person won't ever have a chance, even theoretically. Whereas somebody who voted 2 weeks before that would. And there's no difference between those two voters, because those two voters both cast a timely ballot under the law. And that, I think, is an equal protection problem. So if you cut off the cure period at 8 p.m. on election day, some people who voted timely ballots will have the cure opportunity and others won't. And that's why I recommended the following Monday at 5. Because that does give at least some period of time after the last ballots when we can receive them, which is 5 p.m. on Fridays, under the court ruling, to get that word back to those voters in some way, shape, or form, and give them a chance to do it. That's the rationale behind that conversation.
Thank you. So I see this public comment. I think we have to have a motion on public comment.
I will move to adopt Mr. Parks' suggestion.
I'll second. Motion made, seconded. Public comment, this is always.
Yes, Carol Miller. So how would someone fix their ballot? They have to open it, take it out, somehow get a secrecy envelope, which I assume if they didn't put it in there, they could turn it out or don't know. So how are they gonna fix it?
It's a great question. The process would be that the person would go to the designated location indicated by the letter or the email. The ballots that have been identified in this category would be maintained in a secure holding facility or holding some locked space at that facility. We would come in, it would establish who they are through identification, so we're not just giving anybody someone's ballot. They would then be handed their ballot, they would be handed a new blank outside envelope and a privacy envelope. They would then be permitted within the space, just like downstairs, you go off in the corner at the privacy booth, open their own envelope, determine if it's naked or not. At that point, they would have to put it in the privacy envelope that they've been given, put it in the new outside envelope they've been given. This would have to be done under at least some degree of supervision so they weren't changing their ballot. But that would be relatively easy. Just told, you're not going to change your ballot. You're going to open the envelope, put it in these two fresh envelopes. They would complete the voter declaration on the back of that envelope, the outside envelope, just like on every outside envelope for a mail or absentee ballot. Seal it up and bring it back to the county.
So since this has never been done before, I have visions of you sending them out and 50 of 100, let's say, the privacy, the secrecy envelope is in there. I can just see people being pretty upset that they have to come back to the courthouse or wherever, open it up and prove that they did it right.
Okay, well,
So I think there's a lot of room for issues.
there's a risk of that. It depends on how good the technology is.
Well, right, but we don't know. Because we've never
Well,
used it.
I suspected that the Blue Crest probably has statistics about that. They have these types of companies that have those kinds of statistics about reliability of those features. And if it were 50% reliable, I have a feeling that would be a feature that would not recommend. We're not going to go into the machine. I have to believe this is a relatively reliable, although I'm sure not foolproof measure. I do not have the statistics, although I'm pretty certain that this company would have.
I mean, it just seems to me there's commercials, every other commercial talks about a liquid ballot. Quite frankly, if someone can't do it right, I mean, it's a shame they don't do it right. Their vote's not gonna be counted, but outside of going door to door and handing someone a ballot and walking them through it, I think everything's been done to educate the voters. So now we're saying, oh, this is like taking an SAT test. If you get it wrong, you don't get another chance to do it. They don't keep coming back and saying, oh, this is not right. Fill his blocks in a little better.
I hear you, but it's not my position for the board. I would just note
It
that.
just seems to me
SAT
you
test is
just
not
keep giving
fundamental.
more and more opportunities. It'll be Christmas by the time we have results.
Thank you. Councilwoman,
Yeah, I have, just a question really, because it's not just the naked ballot that could get rejected. My understanding is the Blue Crest machine has the ability to kick out into one of these, shorter categories, ballots that are not signed, for example. And we know we get those back. I mean, I know we got those back in primary. So here's my question. Why, if we know we're gonna get a ballot back that's not signed, we know we cannot count it, correct? Am I correct in that? We know we can't count it. I mean, absent the cure, we know we can't count it. Isn't that correct?
That is,
Okay,
I mean, it's a
so,
matter for the board, but that's my recommendation.
yeah, I mean, my understanding has been that the legal standard is if an affirmation is not signed. I mean, we're not checking the handwriting, but if you have, for the court's order, but if the affirmation is not signed, it's just like the naked ballot, we're not gonna count it. My question, and this is really why do we have to mark them received? If we know it's not been signed, we know we are not gonna count it. In a way, and I'm just suggesting this to the board, and I don't know, Mr. Parks will have to give this some consideration, but if a ballot can't be counted, why are we marking them received in the SURE system? That means they don't even have the ability to fill out a provisional ballot. Where on the other hand, if they were marked as simply not being received, it's effectively giving notice to the voter that we do not have a ballot from you that we can count. And therefore, you can go vote provisionally, you can go get a replacement ballot. You know, you can do any of those things. So my question is, do we have to mark those ballots received? Because in effect, you're giving notice to that voter that there's a problem with their ballot, that it will not be counted. And I just think that may be the easiest way to do it because it will be through every ballot that could be counted. And it doesn't take time away from the staff, which I'm hearing, you know, this isn't just generating a letter. This is generating a way of getting all the defective ballots to a certain place. This is getting people who are trained to do that. This is having that place set up after the election for days. It's staffing it. It is not a small thing. So my question is it legally required that you mark knowingly defective envelopes as having been received when we know we cannot count the votes?
That is a matter that relates, not a code question. I believe it's a SURE system administration question. My understanding is that when you receive ballots, you're supposed to mark them received. I don't believe that you can mark them adjudicated yet, because you can't adjudicate a ballot before election day. You couldn't mark them canceled, which would be what happens when a ballot comes back and that ballot is rejected ultimately by the board. It's marked canceled, and then there's various reason options that are identified.
But if it's marked canceled, the person's vote doesn't count.
Right.
And I guess what I'm saying is, we know based on not just adjudications, but the state law, that if the affirmation is defective, i.e. there's no signature, it's a defective affirmation, we know that. We know it's not going to be counted. That's not an adjudication. That is there's no signature, it's not going to be counted. So, and I guess if the technology of the SURE system is so good that we can tell it doesn't have, not the Blue Crest system, I'm sorry. We can tell it does not have a privacy envelope. If it doesn't have a privacy envelope, it will not be counted. That is not an adjudication. That's not, is it the birth date versus the date it was signed? That's an adjudication.
this is we can't count it. So it seems to me that the easiest way to notify voters is simply not to mark it received.
Well, then you're not notified.
Well, we are, because any voter who's paying attention, do I have to go vote provisionally? Do I have to get a replacement ballot? Well, no, they have to.
Well, I would say that the rationale is that that's going to cause less work for the staff than this letter campaign or this notification campaign that is the subject of my proposal. I think you're ignoring the fact that every one of those voters who hasn't heard back from the board is calling.
Well, every single one of those voters who gets your letter is gonna call, Mr. Parks. Every single one who gets your letter is gonna call. Because this is not something they're gonna know about. And it's not a process, and it's, we are going to be staffing, my understanding is that they are going to be staffing voter services centers through election day to do replacement ballots. But that would be, you could go to any place to do a replacement ballot. You don't have to go to a specific location so that somebody can go through a big pile of ballots, find your specific ballot, give it to you with whatever it is you need to cure it, and you cure it. It's a very different process. So that's just, I just put that out to the board.
Thank you.
I think, couple, I think 37,000 would have already been notified that their ballots have been received. Some portion of that may have
Okay.
the issue. So I think it's something that we should consider perhaps. As we learn the technology, we have new rulings, that I mean, it's something we should consider. So it's an important point. I do have a question for everybody's benefit, Mr. Parks. If you could explain this, the councilwoman raises a good point of the signatures. What happens with that pocket full of envelopes?
So for those envelopes, based on the federal court decisions that I've looked at, I believe we have a constitutional obligation to notify those voters of the issue. There is a clear federal, that was exactly the issue that was being considered by the Southern District of Indiana. The basis of their ruling was not Indiana election law. The basis of the ruling was the 14th Amendment of the United States Constitution, which also applies to Public County. So my guidance is that for those types of defects that will render a ballot not counted, that we will be under the obligation, are under the obligation to notify those voters of the issue, give them an opportunity. And that perhaps was the source of the misunderstanding between the Jackson. We're talking about two separate issues, the naked ballot issue and the defective declaration issue, would be facially defective declaration.
So what you're raising for me, my concern is that we could be subject to an Indiana add-on case about how we're handling the non-opportunity to cure naked ballots. Have you seen that? Have you heard that? What did you do?
I have not seen it one way or the other. All I know is that at least one major county in Pennsylvania, with many hundreds of thousands of people in it, has decided that they're going to do this.
I looked at it, they're bigger than a significant.
We have some more public comment. Yes, sir.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Michael Pupio, 253 Allison Road, Springfield, Pennsylvania. I'd like to start out by thanking the election board for their time, their service, and as well as the county and the folks in this room for the time they have. I haven't necessarily always agreed with every decision you made, but I respect the time that you put into it. On the comment for the public comment, that was not why I attended today, but to respond to the motion. I would think you are, from a legal perspective, I would think that with it not being in the code and with it being 14 days out and with the potential confusion it could cause, I would say from a legal perspective, you were certainly inviting some litigation that would clarify the position. And again, the litigation that happens is not necessarily as it's portrayed in the press, with one group trying to not count votes and one group trying to count votes. It's clarification. That's what the court system is for. But I would submit to you, from a practical standpoint, it would be a very interesting legal question, but practically 13 days out from an election that has generated such significant interest, as well as acrimony at times, that it would not be the most practical thing to do. I would think, again, practicality, but then from a legal standpoint, it opens the door to a slippery slope. How are you? My mother doesn't have an email address. Calls me every day to see if the ballot was there. How are you handicapped woman? How are you reaching her? I think you end up with some disparities that take place. And I would also indicate that there is an opportunity and a time to trust the voter. That is one thing I have gained in my experience and the benefit of being involved in politics is that he or she who underestimates the voter does so at their peril. And at some point at the election ballot, at the process, even if an undervote is on and they get it 2 or 3 times and they scan it, once they scan it at that point, they can't get it back. So maybe that analogy might not be direct to the things Mr. Parks Solicitor Parks was saying, but at some point the process has to end. So for those reasons, I would submit to you that I would submit to you it would not be the best motion to approve at this point. Thank you for your time again.
Thank you. Are there any others? Yes, sir.
Neil Khan, formerly Hastings, the first thing is I would just say that I think it would make sense to see if we get stats on the error rate, so we get a sense of how often, this issue comes up, and how often it's accurate. But I think, I need to step back a little bit further, and I think that the Constitution gives every citizen rights and how their vote counted. It doesn't say it's counted only if you fill out Form A, Form B, Form C, and Form D correct. That's not how it works, right? And the people in this room, there's no lot of education, but by virtue of where people were chosen and come here on Wednesday in the middle of the day, we follow this closely. But there are a lot of people who don't follow these things closely. There are people who don't have access to the internet. There are people who don't have a television. They're seniors. Who may have issues with the complications. There are people for whom English is their first language. And so, it strikes me that it's incumbent on the county to use all of the tools in its arrows in its quiver, so to speak, to try and make sure every people in this county who has the wherewithal to come and cast a vote. And, in an election that has a national spotlight, I would think that you would want to be on the side of having most people's votes counted and making sure that ballots weren't thrown away without giving them a chance to cure it. If that spotlight comes and shines on Pennsylvania after the election.
Olivia Thorne, and I'm representing the League of Women Voters today. We are getting dozens of calls a day, and these are coming mostly from people who have voted for years but are anxious this year. They're anxious because it's new. They're anxious because of everything else that's going on around them. But all they really want to do is make sure their vote is counted. They're waiting anxiously, and I'm sure they're swapping at times to the vote PA system, as they're checking 3 or 4 times a day, and I suggest that that's not really helpful to the system as well. But what they're trying to do is vote properly. I do agree that it would be very nice to think that all of this stuff is in television is seen by everybody and they know about secrecy ballots. But I'm going to guess that the people who don't put in the secrecy ballot are not seeing these other ads that the rest of us feel like we're seeing all the time. But it seems to me that the concept, and certainly for the league, is that everybody should have the opportunity to vote and try to do it as best they can. If there's something that we have to technologically check it and do it in a way to help it so that everybody can feel, especially in this election, that their vote opportunity, that we should try to do that.
Is there any other public comment?
Hi, Naomi Antonello, 2873 Dogwood Lane, Rudolph, PA. So as a voter, I do feel uncomfortable. I feel like we are continually moving the goalposts. And we are 14 days out from this election. And, for you to want to turn on this feature and, cure and make it valid, the following Monday, you have to believe that there is a significant amount of naked ballots out there, correct? No?
I don't have an opinion on the issue,
Okay.
but I do know
So,
that in the litigation about, in the recent Pennsylvania Supreme Court, eventually
possibly, you know, it could come down to maybe the count in Delaware County. You know, that following Monday for the naked ballot cure. I can just see that this election will come down to that. And, you know, I don't think it's right, and I'm not comfortable with it. I have witnessed what seems like a 24/7 education campaign. It's all over the radio, it's all over the TV. You know, the woman showing people how to put the ballot into the envelope. I don't think, I personally, I'm uncomfortable with extending this in particular to the following Monday. That first and foremost, I feel like we are moving the goalposts and it's unreasonable. But, you know, I don't really agree with this sort of at all. So I just want to leave that there.
Thank you.
Just one point, clarification. So, there will be a number of ballots that are not adjudicated by that Monday. There will be a ton of provisional ballots for which a voter has the opportunity to bring an ID in until that Monday. There are, for public ballots, uniformed and overseas military ballots that don't even have to come into us. You have to have postmarks, I think, for 10 days after the election day for us to receive them. So we have never had final election results on the night of the election, or the day after that, or the week after that. Final election results come when the county certifies the results, which is, I think, 20 days after. So I understand your point, but just so folks understand, this isn't going to be, this doesn't change the timetable of the finalization of election results in Delaware County one way or the other. And not doing it won't change the timetable.
Okay, I would just like to add to that, in 2016, the presidential election was separated by 42,000 votes. And you set up to 5% of the ballots for potentially being naked ballots and need to be cured. And that 5% would probably equate to somewhere, you know, tens of thousands, maybe 20, 30,000 that would have pending of registered voters. So, you know, that could actually possibly swing this election one way or the other. Is those naked ballots that you want to do it probably Monday. So I just want to make sure everyone's aware.
You have to dominate statewide, that'd be great.
Well, yeah, and it could come down to the count in Delaware County of these naked ballots that you want people to have the opportunity to cure 6 days after.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am. Then you're next, and I think that was the last public comment we have.
Cynthia Long, 9 Cloverdale Avenue, Upper Darby. So if I understand the procedure correctly, once the machine says it's too late and it goes into the pocket, then there will either be an email or a written letter sent to the voter. Regarding the emails, I imagine that would be one mass email to many people, not like individual emails. So I would want assurances for privacy that it would all be like blind carbon copied so people wouldn't know each other's emails. Can you give me any information about that?
Yeah, I don't think it's a mass email. I think it could be a customized email using basically technology that sends out individuals. Just like when you get an email from, I don't know, so I get emails from Dick's Toys and send some fishing tackle like once a day. It's not like everybody else that they sent that to that they sent. We have technology that allows us to.
Now, what if the email gets bounced back and doesn't go through? Is that creating a situation where some people are notified and some people aren't, and that's really not fair?
Understood. The goal is to notify everyone. And it's a great point. What I would recommend is email where we have it, because that's the best means we have for those folks. Paper mail for people who don't have email. And if an email bounces back, then we would default to paper mail for that person, because having an email bounce back is basically the function of not having.
And we don't know how many we have, so we can't anticipate postage costs at this point.
Correct.
So I've had the experience, maybe some of you in this room have had the experience of of getting a letter from the post office that you've packaged to pick up. Then you go to the post office to pick it up. You're waiting in line, there's a long line, the clerk at the corner has to go look for it. I've had the experience where the clerk at the post office can't find my package. So I'm concerned that something similar to that might happen. The voter comes in and whoever's at the counter can't locate their envelope. And also, I know in previous meetings, you made it very clear that only 2 or 3 people have the keys to the locked door where the ballots are stored. So, like, what if I come in to fix my ballot? Oh, well, she has the key, but she's at lunch. I just really see a lot of problems, just like, you know, you go to the post office, pick up your package, and they don't know where it is.
Well, the administration of elections, Mary Ann, can speak to this, speak to it as well, it's incredibly complex. These are the types of detailed issues that they spend day in, day out, night in and night out, trying to troubleshoot, participate, and avoid. So, you're right, these are things that have to be worked through on the administration side to make sure these types of issues don't happen. But that's nothing different from every other piece of the way that this election office has to operate, with everything it does, from getting machines out to the polling places, collecting ballots at the end of the night, administering the staff, hiring staff, training staff. I mean, there are immense complexities in this process. And I would say that there's nothing uniquely complex about this proposition. It's complex, but it's in line with all the other administrative issues that these people who are very, very effective professionals have to manage on a day-to-day basis.
All right, thank you.
You're saying, excuse me if I may, you're saying that these details have to be worked out, so you're asking the election board to vote on something when all the details haven't been worked out.
Well, we do that a lot. We approve an idea and a concept and then staff continues to work out that. Yes, ma'am, you were.
Jody Mayor, Brookhaven, I'm representing the League of Women Voters as well. And I just want to point out that if Mr. Parks, if that 5% is correct, that would be about 7,000 of the ballots that have already been sent out. And this is a new thing, this mail-in ballot voting. And a lot of people are taking advantage of it that never did this before. And so I think that if any possibility of people being able to correct their mistakes should be done.
And I think we have one last comment, yes, ma'am, we can let you know.
Yes, hi, Leah Hoops, 241 Salty Lane, Chatsworth, Pennsylvania. So just real quick, if my understanding is correct, so 14 days prior to one of the most important elections we will probably ever see in our lifetime, the gentleman, Mr. Parks, I'm sorry,
Correct.
is requesting something that has never been brought up by legislation, is not technically a law, and seems like a loophole. Something that's never been done before, technology that we've never used before. And then based on a win and a prayer, according to Mrs. Hagan, I'm sorry, is that your name? Okay, to the possibility that this is something that would be effective in Delaware County. So what you're saying is you're going to be able to provide training to all the election staff 14 days prior. You're going to either have extra hours, which would cost the taxpayers. And then on top of it, if someone has to rectify a naked ballot and they're using the mail-in system for safety reasons, you're now asking the person to leave their home, come to, I would assume, the election board, and have to be in person, which is counterproductive to the whole reason why we're doing mail-in ballots. Is that correct?
Well, I won't agree to all your premises, but as to your last question, you're right. Somebody would have to come in here, they'd have to make the choice. Am I gonna roll with the ballot I sent in, or am I gonna have to come in person and fix it?
Okay.
There's no way to fix it other than in person.
And who's working the bill for this whole training and process?
Well,
So when I,
ultimately, if this requires the hiring of additional staff, then that would be a taxpayer expense.
and do we know what that expense will cost?
However, there aren't additional hours allotted for this. This would be during established office hours. So there's not going to be
I'm talking about the training, for the actual use of the technology that we've never used before.
Well, the technology is already trained.
You're already trained
Yeah,
to use that?
that's why that happened.
Okay, and you know, of course, you can take extra time on the already number of staff.
Somebody is going to have to take the ballots that are identified as potentially make the ballot and create a list of those voters and make them, and create using a listserv or some kind of mail merge type technology, the letters that go out to the voters. So that will take time, much about that, and that's staff time. So staff could be doing other things.
Okay, you're introducing us 14 days prior to an election.
That is,
And so
we are 13 days before the election.
Based on a loophole, basically, because there's nothing's been decided by legislation. What would you call it?
Call it a matter for the discussion.
Okay.
All right, so last comment.
Thank you for the opportunity, Andrew Riley, Middletown Township. It just seems where we only know this is being implemented in Allegheny County here. I know, Mr. Parsons, it may be otherwise, so everyone wants to know. Seems to me that some broad rule about being able to cure naked ballots should be something that the legislature, the Department of State, or courts would do on a statewide basis. To do it separately just seems odd. Number two, Ms. Jackson, who's going to be implementing this, said to you directly, in charge of it, let's stick to the essentials. 14 days out of new machines, let's stick to the essentials. And lastly, and most importantly, what I've heard no one address, in which I waited for a comment on it, Mr. Parks says it, we went through the process, someone walks in with these ballots and says, hey, they're going to be given their ballot to open up. He says there's going to have to be some supervision over the voting process to make sure they don't change their ballot. And I think he's correct, but we don't have anywhere in our election code that allows us to supervise someone casting a ballot. You're basically going to have a system where workers are going to be, they're not going to want to supervise because they're always going in the privacy area. What's the supervision going to be? Are we going to then tell them, when you take it out, give it to us, we're going to copy it, then you fill it out, they're going to compare it later? What kind of supervision are you going to do to make sure someone's not changing it? And that's the problem with all this stuff. Election fraud occurs in the dark. So I would say to you, Mr. Parks, put his finger on it. He's acting more of an advocate here, and I don't think that's correct. But I believe you're entering a situation that your own department head is saying not to do. But how are you going to ensure that someone doesn't change their ballot? What's the quote limited measure of supervision you're going to provide? Because I don't know, election code, votes are supposed to be cast in secrecy, in privacy, without coercion, and without intimidation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I do agree with many of the things you said, although I disagree that Mr. Parks is being an advocate. I think he was presenting an idea.
Noted.
Thank you. Mr. Parks, did you want to respond?
Sure. In terms of the supervision, we take several forms. One, the person will be advised when they were given their envelope back, you're not allowed to change your ballot, you're not allowed to mark the ballot. You're simply allowed to open up the envelope and put the ballot in these other clean envelopes. Number two, people vote under general supervision of election staff and officials hundreds of thousands of times on election day. No one's looking over anyone's shoulders, but somebody is 10 feet away, 6 feet away, generally observing the situation. So that would be the exact same here, and their staff, that's part of the reason that the person is going to be required to make this change, if at all, in the office and not walk out into the hall or whatever, because you couldn't have a general monitoring any more than when you receive your ballot in a polling place. You can then walk out of the polling place and fill it out down the hallway and come back in.
It's different in the general, when you vote, you have the general supervision. Say you're voting for provisional ballot, you go over to the area. Well, they expect you to be writing and doing things with provisional ballot. In this situation, you're saying, listen, don't change it, but they get it and they see it and say, you know what, maybe I should. How are you going to prevent them from changing? You're not.
Ms. Jackson, last time we met, which was not that long ago, there was some concerns about staffing. I am under the impression that maybe some of them have been resolved, but I really want to know, because this, I have to say this to be like Martin, and you're the League of Women Voters, saying, you know, everybody wants their vote to be counted. That's my experience. I have friends who have literally promised me that they voted on machines in the primary, okay? And these are good citizens, hardworking people, and that was because of, you know, however many years of voting on machines, that's sort of how they remember the primary, right? It was an odd time. And I have, you know, Mr. Parks making the point legally that gives me some concern that should we be giving the naked ballot voters an opportunity to cure, similar to the signature, non-signature voters, similar to those without ID that need to have it because it's their first time voting at a site, et cetera. So I really am struggling with this. And on the flip side, we have asked a tremendous amount of our staff, a tremendous amount. Delaware County is unique, and when we say, you know, the technology is new, I mean, so much is new. When we started this, and apparently according to Councilwoman Ruthven, that the county council, there wasn't a single dollar budgeted for the mail-in ballot operation by the previous administration. I mean, a single dollar, imagine that. And look at where we are today. And our teams are working so hard to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to vote. And I don't think anybody can appreciate that if they haven't lived it. And I haven't. I get to sit and come to the board meetings. I am very engaged with it as much as possible. I went to Subaru Park, Mr. Burr, so I could see the atmosphere there. I was there on election day in his offices. We have an incredible team. So at this question that each of us has to decide on the board, puts into stress really important things. The fundamental constitutional right, really, that makes us a democracy. The right for everybody to want to have their vote counted, with staff that is working already, making Herculean efforts to get this election for everybody, no matter what your position is. So I'm telling you right now, board members, I'm struggling with this. So I would like to just hear, Ms. Miller, I see you have a hand. I do want to hear what you are on staffing.
I understand your struggle, and I see that, but what I also see is it should be possible for somebody to give them the envelope. They don't go to a booth where they are another room, where the ballot is only on one side, it's folded. And so you should be able to have them right there without a pen or without a, I'm sure you have to have a pen to the outside envelope. But there ought to be a way that they can take it out of one envelope, stick it in the other envelope, and then you give them this, after they've done that, and they put it into the third envelope, the outside envelope. Then you give them the pen and say, here, now fill out this part, make it look like the one you did before. And the biggest other concern, I think, is you have to make sure they put in a date that is accurate based on filling out that envelope now. Should they be putting in their other date from before? Or should they be putting in that current date, which looks like it's after the election, which if it ever has to be recounted at some point, would then look like it's an erroneous ballot. So I appreciate what you're all having to go through and think about. And I think all we can really do is just offer suggestions or ideas.
And I have to tell you, I'm not, the supervision I think can be carried out. I think that can be carried out with the right guidance. And I do think, I disagree with Mr. Byrne. I think we are imbued with this discretion. The law, the election code is not a tax code, and it's not, and there's been a new ruling by the court that does create a difference of situation here under the law that needs some filling out of the process. So, but I do, Ms. Jackson, I would like to understand where we are on staffing, because I know that's been a major struggle, and it is important to me that we say, we can't just sit here and say, do this, and then you all say, yeah, we said we could because we understand that you voted on it, but it's possible.
The public comment's over. So,
Okay,
Ms. Jackson.
I just wanna, you know, talking about election fraud,
Yes,
this
ma'am.
would be a very difficult way to commit election fraud, because if the person takes their ballot and they change it, it's not gonna go through the scan.
I'm not concerned. I agree with, and I agree with you, it can be supervised appropriately.
Ms. Jackson,
Uh,
Ms. Montgomery has a question.
Yes, thank you guys for the question. So from a staffing perspective, I think we're getting our legs under, I mean, there are two separate issues here. There's the staffing in the lead up to the election, and then I think there's the staffing around the process that happens on election day. We're behind when it comes from staffing on election day, but we'll get there. I think we are making much greater strides in staffing in the lead up to elections. So Do I think we could do this? Yes. Do I think that we could train people adequately on how to do this, at least from a staff perspective? Yes. We have to move the ballots from Chester to media because public is not allowed in Chester. So we have to move them here. I don't think that that would be an issue. It is one more thing that asked us to do, but can I also add a little additional comment? As somebody who worked at, this is a hard one, as somebody who worked at the Upper Darby Voter Service Center this weekend, I was amazed at how many people were going to fill out their ballots incorrectly, or not even fill them out, but leave specific things off, or not put them in the secrecy ballot. So there was a lot of concern on voters around making sure that they did it right, and even so, there were definitely more than a handful who weren't going to do it right.
How do we know that?
I had people, so while I can't watch somebody fill out their ballot, you know, I had people say, did I do this right? And I would say, I can't watch you fill out your ballot. But I can ask, did you sign it? Did you put the appropriate date? And did you put it in the secrecy ballot? The secrecy envelope. But I could certainly from a distance, I wasn't watching them fill out their ballot.
Okay, we know what public comment on this issue. I want to say, I don't know that I can support the motion as it currently stands. I have concerns about allowing persons to make changes to the ballot, to the envelope, and to election day. I also have some concerns about having whatever the number is, 5,000, 10,000 people show up to do this, and whether we can adequately protect the money, like whatever things we have to do. I would propose perhaps a compromise position. I'm sure people on both sides of the issue, whatever we do, still what we should do, or should not be doing. I would think it would be feasible to do this process, to identify underweight ballots, to send a communication, whether by email or by letter, to the voter saying, this is what we've done, sorted your envelope, you identified you didn't sign it. If that sign will be rejected, we suggest you consider voting provisional ballot. Same thing, we waive your return of your mail-in ballot. It appears to be underweight, having closed the privacy envelope. If it doesn't have a privacy envelope, it will be rejected. We suggest you consider a provisional ballot.
What about the one on election?
Well, we're only going to be able to do the notices through the day before election day. Once things are coming up for election day, we obviously can't tell people to go on provisional ballot. I think everything is important. It's a clear issue. This is a very good point raised about this procedure that was recommended.
I thought I heard Mr. Parks saying that he had significant legal issues with that, because I heard why I like the compromise. I'm really struggling with that. I think it's obvious. I tried to make it obvious. Mr. Parks, that procedure that's been suggested as a compromise.
The only concern I have about it is that you wouldn't be able to afford that same notice to people whose ballot came in after election day, because there would be no way for them to vote for the ballot. That would be no issue.
Right.
Can I, while I was sitting here in this meeting, I emailed the Secretary of
I
State.
thought there was a public comment.
I would just like to offer some information to the
It
board.
doesn't matter, public comment. If you're gonna take public comment from a council member who is here representing as a voter or the public, then I should be able to speak as well. You can't have favoritism.
No one's done anything.
No one's done anything.
Okay, so then
Chairman
I can
hasn't
have a
even
comment,
discussed this yet.
so I can have comments.
No.
After she's finished?
She's not making a comment. I was waiting for her to take a breath so I could tell her, the same as I told you when you tried to make a comment, that we closed public comment. We could have public comment all day, and I understand it's frustrating, I apologize, but we've taken
Thank you.
40+ minutes of public comment. And I've twice said, we're done, and our good friends from Legal with Voters, I took their comments, and I try not to be rude.
I understand.
I'm
Thank you for
I
the
apologize, but
Thank you.
I can't let it go on. You have any thoughts?
Yeah, I do. I mean, hearing this, chuckle a little bit about, being sued one way or the other. I think, that being sued really is not something we should be chuckling about. I mean, we should be looking to do things right and not being sued. And I think in this instance, and I think being sued is a good thing because it makes sure that things are done right, they're done according to the law. So I think you're right. If we do something here, we're going to be sued. And I don't think that it's necessary. I don't think there's been a need shown for it. I don't think there's any authority shown for it. I think that it's a stretch on people that are working for us who are already overworked. And I think if it needs to be cleared up through legislation after this election, then maybe that's the way it has to go. But I think to take action with 14 or 13 and a half days left, when we don't, again, Mr. Parks talked about proposal, letters, and we haven't seen any of that stuff. And I don't think it's right. I've voiced this opinion on many different issues that I don't like to take votes, and I won't take votes on things that are not given to me in enough advance notice. And let me see what we're talking about. We don't have a proposal in front of us. How can we know? We say, go down and make sure these votes are seen. So I don't want to be sued. I don't like being sued. I think being sued is okay if it's for the right purpose. And I think that if we do this, we're going to get sued. If we don't do this, there's no reason to sue us, and there's no need for it. So, well, why do we create this?
We may get sued for not acting.
Right, that's my concern, is what Mr. Parks has said, is that
Nothing.
this is an open issue. The other issue recently was summarily denied, and I don't think there was a basis for that. But
What was summarily
this- Both judges immediately on the preliminary injunction motion found in favor of the decision. Yeah, and then I understand.
It was emergency, it was not summarily denied as far as the merits.
I'm just saying, I
Just like.
don't think those, that gets in there. This is an open question of law.
It is an open question also. Let the legislature fix it. We're not supposed to be here ruling from the election board. We're ruling from the election board solicitor's office. It's something the legislature's got to look at.
Voters may be denied their right to vote, as the League of Women Voters have indicated. I think that's fair. There is law that isn't directly on point that supports this.
There is no.
There is law. Mr. Parks has presented law.
Yeah, district court vignette, and I haven't seen that. District court vignette, you're gonna argue that?
You can vote.
I know I should.
Actually,
I don't think that, although with all due respect, and the problem with the motion to amend is I think it does create a difference. Either way, I am inclined to support the motion. I'm also inclined to, if others are not, the people that I did think there's some additional information on, there's not much time. There really is.
the motion to table seconded, this is labeled as. Next is, Ms. Jackson's report.
Thank you, Councilman Lawrence. A few things that I wanted to report on. We have completed all the content a while ago, actually, for poll worker training. It's all posted online on our website. We will be hosting hands-on equipment training, as well as a series of teleconferences where poll workers can phone in and ask questions of a representative panel of people who can answer their questions. We're working on the pickup and drop-off process for our poll workers right now. We think we're putting a process in place that's going to be much more convenient for people in multiple locations across the county versus just one location. We've spent a lot of time over the past 2 weeks talking about the election day process at our election bureau in Chester. We're currently scheduled to perform a mock election on October actually run through the process before election day and make sure that the process is working smoothly. And then lastly, I'd just like to say that having been to all the voter service centers, I think the number of people who are showing up to voter service centers has been large. People hanging around the block this weekend, both October Derby and media. And yeah, I just wanted to say that people seem to be making really good use of the voter service centers. So I just wanted to provide those few updates.
Very good.
The mock election, which is something about it, is it going to be with actual candidates or is it going to be hypothetical?
It's more of an internal process for us to just make sure, because you have to think about actually the flow of the ballot and making sure that all of our internal processes. So no, it's not for candidates, it's just for us to make sure that it goes.
It's a training exercise.
It's a training.
You say mock election, people think like when I was in second grade, we had a mock election. It's not a mock election.
No,
It's a training
it's
exercise.
totally, it's an internal training
But
exercise.
what I'm concerned about is I would like you to not have actual candidates things because I wouldn't want some kind of release to the press or something that someone has added to the election. So
Point taken.
mock game.
The Tatum always comes up with it.
Yeah, yeah.
I remember one of those sample
Usually
ballots.
something-
George Washington against Thomas Jefferson, that was a close race a couple of years ago. Ms. Hagan, you're next, actually. You can come up with some ideas as part of your report if you wish, or you can do your report.
I think, most of my report was really written into our earlier conversation when I reported our numbers. And, that we have gotten a couple of additional new staff, so, certainly, as I said earlier, there's still a lot to accomplish, but I think we're heading in a good direction.
Thank you. I'm looking for Mr. Savage's report on my phone computer. I got it. I found it. A lot of emails are sitting here. Okay, Mr. Savage, as I mentioned before, his responsibilities today prevent him from being here. He's available by phone. I'll call him, but his report was that the printed ballots were received this morning. The voting machine department staff is working with your election staff to distribute ballots to the appropriate pages. Engagement is continuing.
I just want to say to the League of Women Voters or to others listening, if you do have a concern about this gap, sort of the one that I do think we have a huge discretion as a board, but there would be a legal challenge whether we had voted for that or not. I would consider, if you have counsel, which I think the league might at least nationally, consider raising that issue with them and any others, because I do think, while I don't want to invite litigation, and our staff had to spend a tremendous amount of time on litigation recently that I thought was frivolous, and it was found in favor of the board's prior decision. I do think that
It was not found in the.
for the preliminary injunction motion, it was, and it was appealed.
Emergency injunction, not the preliminary.
Right, the emergency injunction motion was found in the board's favor twice.
Didn't address the
I think I heard speaker.
The decisions were in the board's favor.
If you want to.
I would encourage, I just would encourage you to consult with your counsel on whether or not you think there's an issue to raise, because it's certainly one that will.
The last resolution, I'm sorry.
I'm talking about the question of whether or not there should be an opportunity to secure a naked ballot. To the extent that you have counsel and an advocacy group that's, I think, nonpartisan, I would consider raising that with your counsel to determine.
I think that I'd like to clarify, just so that there isn't any misunderstanding, is that what I was really trying to talk about is our basic premise of life is getting everybody to vote and getting everybody to be able to. We voted yes and get them counted, and if somebody's trying to vote, make sure that they have an opportunity. I'm not sure this is worth litigation over. I think this is more a means of just keeping to remind people that, as much as this election and this time is very difficult, if we can find ways to do things, we want to.
Okay, well, just I just was encouraging you to explore that more if you want to, because we have a solicitor's opinion, that this would be an option that was presented to the board. This is something.
You're thinking of for Pennsylvania, not for.
I am speaking for Pennsylvania, but I believe you have counsel that did it.
I understand, I really don't do.
And I do thank you for coming here and you know, for a long time been a staunch advocate for voters' rights, and you and you know, the other members of the league were very diligent with that. And, you know, the board does appreciate, not only your efforts, but also your opinions and insight, on the process.
Well, I think the league would also like to thank you for what you've done on Walton Valley. I mean, it's terrific, and it's been more than we could have even envisioned as it started out. It's just, in looking at the lines outside, you know, it's just amazing.
It was impressive. There was a lot of people out there.
It's certainly.
Yeah, I just wanted to, yeah, please, thank you. I just wanted to respond. I mean, I heard Ms. Luppenheimer say several times about the litigation last week was frivolous. I don't think the litigation last week was at all frivolous. I think that ultimately the decision was made, it would be made, that it was a violation of the Sunshine Law. I think that what was decided was what they call a special emergency injunction, which has very high burdens, and that was all that was decided, and the court that reviewed it on appeal made that especially clear. None of the courts addressed the merits of the case. So to say that there were frivolous cases is not right. It's also not right that the people that brought that suit, because I said earlier that, you know, people who bring those suits are doing it to shape the law, and sometimes that needs to be done. But to say that the things are frivolous and to have them called trolls and other things on the internet by council members is just not appropriate. I hope that people won't be afraid or to bring up what they think is wrong another time because of being called names.
Thank you, Jim. We skipped, Ms. Winterbottom's report.
Yes, so on Monday, the last day to register, we saw a high volume of registration at our counter and online. We are currently at 422,000 registered voters in Delaware County. In the last week, from today to last Wednesday, we have processed approximately 12,000 applications. We are almost done with all that backlog up until registrations received on Monday. And then we'll be working on our street list, tabulation, and poll books. So we're good.
When do you think you'll be done with the registration?
I feel comfortable to say tomorrow.
Great. So that is tremendous to be done so quickly, given the short time frame that we're available this year prior to your certain law, then you should be congratulated. Thank you, Kristen. Okay, that concludes our itemized matters. We still have public comment. Anyone with general public comment? Yes, sir.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Michael Pupio, 253 Allison Road. A few issues last evening while watching the news, 10 o'clock news, Action News, this video came on. And they are describing the drop boxes that were open. That's video clip I can certainly send to you. But if you take the opportunity, it's an individual handing in at least 3 ballots in the box. I don't know if the woman's a Republican, and I don't know if it was a man or a woman. I saw what appeared to be a wedding ring on the figure that appeared to be a female hand. I don't know if the woman's a Republican, Democrat, Independent, Green, whatever initiative you want to put next to it. I submit to you that there is an issue that is here, and that this board, the election officials, the county, as well as county council, has an opportunity with regard to a megaphone to indicate when these rights were expanded. I'm not commenting on whether they have been expanded or not expanded, right, wrong, or indifferent. It is against the election code to submit more than one ballot unless the forms are there. We potentially turn this woman into a criminal, whoever she is. I'll bring my mother up again. Will you take my ballot to the courthouse? No. I'll drive you to the courthouse. You can put your ballot in, or I'll drive you to the lockbox. The ballot box, you can put your ballot in. These are signage. The district attorney asked me to be on their election day task force. I indicated yes. I think the integrity of the election is the most important thing. I do not support comments from anybody that looks to undermine the integrity of the election. That's not what we as a county should be striving for with all the scrutiny. But you have the opportunity to correct this. There are 13 days. I think you have the ability to indicate to folks the signage is simple. Signs by tomorrow for 50 boxes. Put them there. I think we are inadvertently making people violate the election code just simply due to a lack of knowledge. The don't vote naked ballots, great campaign. I mean, really, really catchy, trying to educate folks. I think you have an obligation to do that as well. I sincerely believe it's not, to me, it's not a partisan issue. It was something I brought up to Mr. Rouse very early on. Why turn these folks into that? You have the opportunity to speak to that and address that in a fashion. And I respectfully would suggest you have the obligation to do so. The other topic that I wanted to address, I spent multiple hours with my counterpart. I am the chair of the Springfield Republican Party. Ray Santorelli is the chair of the Springfield Democrat Party. We spent multiple times with Ms. Christine Iacona on the phone trying to identify who our poll workers are and that sort, and we were able to do that. But just an email I got at 1:18 p.m., just again letting you know, none of the poll workers in the 3rd Ward have been notified yet, nor none have had any training to work the polls. I understand everybody's working hard. You have a problem. Your poll workers have not been communicated with and contacted with. Even in a town where everyone agrees who these poll workers should be, like ours, they haven't been contacted with new machines, new provisions. I respectfully suggest that, I'm not saying people are not working hard. I'm saying you have a problem. I'm bringing it to your attention. It is a repeated question that gets asked. And respectfully, I'm not that person that should answer that question. These folks are like, once they volunteer for these positions, get elected, they are county election officials. It's the responsibility of the county to get them. I think you're behind, and I wanted to bring it to your attention. Those are my 2 points. I again thank you for your service and your time. Thank you kindly.
Michael, thank you. I'm going to make 2 comments, and then I'll ask Ms. Jackson to discuss the training efforts and respond to that. But first, you are correct in that we do need to make clear to people that you are not to bring other people's ballots. And as you said, oftentimes it's you're bringing your mother's ballot, or someone who's going to be out of town, the husband bringing the wife's ballot and bringing the buckets to those boxes, to the post office boxes. And although we know certainly there's nothing, there's no evil intent in your heart delivering your mother's ballot, that is technically a violation of the law. And we do have a duty to not only discourage people from unintentionally violating the law, but we unfortunately have a duty to react if we are made aware of that stuff. We will, following our duties in the code, alert investigators, Mr. Rouse has severed to this Fox News broadcast, and we'll see what can be done about that. Second, I think we should look at making as clear a signage as possible to advise people to only place their own ballot in the box. And I think we have given some direction on that, but I think Mr. Cooper makes the point that we could always do a better job. So let's try to take a look and see if there's possibly something else we can do. And when people are going around to collect these ballots, they could put more stickers on the box or more signage on it.
We did bring that up before, and I think it's either part of our minutes or part of one of this Jackson's reports that we're going to use our best efforts to put that type of sign on the box.
The signage is on the box.
Okay.
But the suggestion is put signage around the box in addition to the signs on the box, that certainly there's no, that's, run it past me first, because there are some guidelines about what the signage around the box can say. I am not, the signage just says, hey, don't drop any ballot other than your own, unless you have the right paperwork. I don't see an issue.
Yeah,
That's all I'm referring to.
The flap of the box that says, you can't.
That's all I'm referring to, Mr. Parks. I just thought it should be more prominent in that we are potentially exposing voters. Look, everybody knows what is not permitted. You know, the harvesting aspects are not permitted. I don't believe that you are chilling anyone's right to vote by an existing law that's there. We should have the obligation to educate those folks, to indicate that that's not permitted. I know the forms are out. I know I've seen some of the emails as to how you do that, and be able to submit someone else's ballot. But I just think we are opening up we are opening up the general public to such scrutiny and allegations of doing bad things. And we don't need to do
The
that.
second comment I wanted to make is I wanted to thank you and all the municipal leaders. I said it at the last meeting, that when Mr. Savage was talking about this, the very significant number of agreements that were reached about the placement and location of polling places. You spoke about how you and Mr. Santarelli worked together in Springfield. That same kind of spirit has been present in many communities. And as much as people may have different views on who should win the election and how to get that done, it is terrific to see people work together on the process to make sure that we can conduct the election in a fair and efficient way. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Now, I'm going to get you, Ms. Jackson, can you talk about the training?
Yes, thank you. So yes, the training content is complete, and I can tell you that the training content is probably some of the best content in the country. I would hold it up to any other county as far as content. Do we have a challenge in reaching poll workers? Yes, it is a challenge. We have addresses of some poll workers, we have email addresses, we will be sending.
13 days.
Well,
We're sending, and we're in the process of sending emails and hard copy letters out today. But I would also ask people, while I wasn't here in the primaries, some of what was told to me was that in asking some of the party leaders to help us disseminate training, some were more willing than others. So I would ask that if there's any way that you can help us get the word out, we'd certainly appreciate it. We'll be contacting party leaders and giving you all the information that you need to help pass along to your people. The content is all online. You can do it.
But why isn't this done already?
okay, ma'am, when it's your turn, you can speak. Let Ms. Jackson.
Yeah, so, this should have been done sooner, to be honest with you. But we're making every effort that we can right
But you
now.
have enough staff.
Ma'am, ma'am,
Okay.
when it's your turn, you can speak, okay?
We're making every effort that we can right now to get in touch with poll workers so that they can go through the training. It's available online. There's no login, there's no anything that they need. It's available on the Delaware County website. So it's available to everybody. We will also be offering hands-on training as well as teleconferences to people. Yes, I understand that we are 2 weeks
Can
away.
I speak? So it seems that we have enough. Oh, Val Biancanello, 2873. Biancanello, 2873 Dogwood Lane, Broomall, PA. So, you have enough workers
Mr. Chairman.
to handle the
Public
hearing
comments
the
is
ballot,
direct
but
to the
then.
board, not
Yeah,
to the
I
chair.
have come from this, and I don't know that the chairman actually did, if you would want to, it is to be directed.
I did, no, I did.
Okay, so can you please, this is not a personal attack on staff, I mean, all you can sit here and criticize, but you have no idea how hard they've been working.
Oh my
None.
goodness, oh my goodness.
So make your
I am
comment.
not
please, to the
criticizing,
board.
I
Make
respect
the
all
comment
your hard
proper.
work.
We are the ones who should be criticized, and we are the ones who are out here making.
I don't
decisions.
need to be berated by you.
Well, make your criticism
Okay.
to us.
So, I'm just saying, in one instance, we have enough workers to cure the ballots and do all that, but then, they haven't received training yet, they're still not assigned. So do we have enough workers? Do we not have enough workers? It seems that whatever's convenient, we either have enough, we don't have enough. Do we? I don't know.
Okay, thank you. Is there any more comments? Thank you. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. I want to say initially that I have a great deal of respect for the situation you find yourselves in, not only with the change in the law, the new machines, and the election coming forward. I do recognize the flow of work and the volume of work and the difficulty of work that's headed your way. I do want to point out something that I think is a potential major disaster, major problem dealing with the ballot boxes. We all know the right to vote is not just simply use the word naked right, simple right, but it's a right that needs to be exercised in secrecy, without coercion and without intimidation. And the Pennsylvania law, when passed, required voters to either mail a ballot in or deliver that ballot to the county election bureau, and that was expanded to drop boxes under the Supreme Court. I recognize that. What I stand to make a comment about is I think we've made a deviation, a mistake, critical mistake, in only having cameras at almost all the drop boxes, I guess with the exception of one, at the government center. And I say this to you because the nature of it, I don't think in people's heart. I think the majority of all of you and everyone who live along, we want everyone's vote to count, and I get that. But in these processes, we have to understand that there are competitive processes and party people and party actors that could take advantage of what I think is a lack of security on these drop boxes. And let me explain. If you take a situation, we all know that ballot harvesting is illegal, and we all talk about having a sign that says, hey, only one can only drop off one. But going with a sign is not far enough. I don't know why these boxes were not stamped. I don't know why these boxes were not stamped with people saying, hey, thank you for coming. Can we just see your ID and make sure it's the person casting it? Wouldn't it be difficult to have 30 people stamped, temporary stamps to do it? And by doing it, what are we going to do in a situation where we have an aggressive nursing home worker who happens to be a partisan, whether Republican, independent, or an aggressive nursing home worker, we're going there and going up and, hey, we mail for you, got your mail ballot here, this is who you want to check off. And they steer it, they coerce the voter thing, and they go and take it, and they just take it in different boxes. We see now that we have people with 2 and 3 putting in one box. Why don't they just simply go to different boxes and cast 50 votes for people and done with? I mean, are we really expecting our park police to be watching these boxes, taking down license plates and memorizing faces? I respect everything you're trying to do. I would simply say that at that point when we decided how to put security on these drop boxes, we didn't go far enough. And I would say the Supreme Court decision and what you're doing is kind of, we recognize ballot harvesting is wrong, but we're not putting up the roadblocks to really frustrate and attempt to do it. It's almost like saying bank robbery is wrong. It's definitely wrong, but we're going to require the banks to keep their doors and their vaults open 24/7. I would suggest to you, we're in a potential situation where we could have problems. I don't know what remedial action you can take now, signs or whatever can be done, but you're going to have a real problem with people who want to be aggressive actors in this campaign, who want to take advantage of the situation that there's simply not enough security. I would submit to you, the first instance was wrong with the legislature. When they say, hey, we're going to have mail-in ballots, there should have been a whole regulations attached to it, flushed out at the time. Obviously, they cut a deal, no party voting, mail-in ballots, and there wasn't enough guidance, and we're all kind of fumbling through it. I respect that. But I'm telling you, I still think in your role, you're the ones that people would come back to and say, hey, we found 4 or 5 actors out there ballot harvesting, and you know what? We have no way to catch them. And under the law, I've done election law. When you allege election fraud under the courts, it really doesn't even come into court unless you can prove it changed the election. So you don't really even hear about it. So it occurs, and we want to try to limit it, but it occurs as a silent crime. And I'm telling you, we're just not putting up enough roadblocks with respect to these drop boxes. Thank you.
I respect your opinion, but I also point out that there's thousands of mailboxes in Delaware County that don't have a camera on them, that somebody could just as easily take, put a stack of ballots and look, that's pretty close to. If you're going to say that we need to above and beyond what the Supreme Court has said, what the legislature has said, and post people in all these boxes. We theoretically have to post people in every mailbox in the United States.
One distinct difference, when they go there and they violate the law and they put it in the US mailbox, they're committing mail fraud, subject to federal crimes and federal murder.
Well, they're committing a felony on the Pennsylvania election law. So
Having our citizens.
so you're saying one felony is going to be a great deterrent? I hear what you're saying, but at the same time, I have to temper it with the practicality of it. I don't think that the drop boxes are the weakest link even in the system. It's closed every night. You know, there's a balancing test that ultimately the legislature did. It's we want to encourage voting, and we're willing to set this statutory scheme up, and we're just implementing it. We're doing what the legislature told us to do. There's obviously differences of opinions, and I respect your opinion, sir. I thank you for it, but I don't know what's next. I know you had your hand up before, man. Okay.
Mr. Kubia, right?
Yes, sir.
So I started. My name is Richard Gibney, Lafayette Avenue, Collingdale, PA. I want to piggyback off of what Mr. Kubia said about huge megaphone being out there that could be used to, kind of stem this. And one of it being the county council page where, well, the representative decided to leave because, I guess you should get called out for this. There was somebody that actually stated that there shouldn't be any reason why he can't drop off 2 or 4 ballots at a time if it's his family members doing it. And instead of saying, hey, that's wrong, no, you shouldn't do that. Well, technically, you shouldn't do that. As a county council person trying to make this a fair election, that didn't do anything to stop that. And she's a voice for this council. No, well, this is involving the elections and drop boxes.
Hold one second, sir. Hold one second. I get accused that I'm way too permissive in letting people speak, and I don't regulate it enough. And I'm willing to give you a little bit of leeway, but I think this sometimes doesn't make a point that, to the extent you have agreements with.
I'm alluding to my next statement.
Right, but that's.
So on top of that, as confirmed via the Facebook post of County Council Member Christie Ritter on October 13th, it's been confirmed that, people have been stuffing these ballot boxes with more than one ballot. And the DA being involved, I mean, is he pursuing charges on this? It's confirmed that they did witness this on the boxes. Are they going forward with these charges? Or are they just permitting this to continue?
They are conducting an investigation. I'm not part of their investigation.
But they admitted that there is the fraud going on.
Who's this?
The DA's office, they said that they did see that happen on camera.
The DA's office has acknowledged that they used the materials they gave them, and they are investigating. I don't have specifics about. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. He saw that
So they did admit it happened, so we just wanted to confirm that the DA's office acknowledges that this is happening.
Well, we all saw the videos. I think you may have been one to show me the video last week.
Yeah,
We got
that's what I'm saying too.
We've seen the video, and we referred that to them for investigation.
And also,
and determining whether or not.
that's the thing is, we don't know, because I'm sending emails, and I'm not getting anything in return to even acknowledge the emails that I've been sending. No, to the election board. I've sent emails, I literally sent emails last meeting, in the middle of a meeting, and still have yet to get an answer, and it's a week later.
We have referred your complaints at the last meeting, which were understood to the DA's office. We are not one from the DA's office, so we can't comment on ongoing investigations. We're you to ask, having had a different but similar law enforcement background, I don't think they would comment on an ongoing investigation. And I do think that what you provided was evidence of a potential criminal activity. First of all, not necessarily the ballot itself wasn't filled out by the voter who is on the allocated, but still, nonetheless, it is potential criminal activity. I am in the habit of at least reminding people not to declare something fraud until that process is gone through the normal we don't know. I don't know that you knew whether or not someone had affidavit, et cetera. It certainly was indicia of illegal activity that we referred to the DA's office, which is the appropriate body.
So you guys can't simply acknowledge the email then and say, hey, thank you for sending this, we'll be forwarding this on. Instead, there's nothing.
I thought we told you that in person, but.
Like I said, this literally was being sent in the middle of your meeting, and a week later, still nothing in writing from you guys acknowledging anything. So this is what I'm saying is,
Mr. Chairman, I think you just acknowledged it, that we did refer to the DA's office, and we did refer specifically your information to the district attorney.
okay, and then my other question too was, referring to, the whole Chester pop-up. I understand that it was the Center for Tech and Civic Life, which is funded by Mark Zuckerberg and his wife, the Rockefeller brothers. And that was grant money that was given to Delaware County for this pop-up voter site and the drop boxes. But from what I understand, they only drove through the city of Chester with these billboard trucks and were actually, to advertise this pop-up location and everything like that. Now, from what I heard from Ms. Jackson is there was some serious stuff going on in Upper Darby where people didn't understand anything. Why did we just target Chester? And why did we not spread maybe these 5 trucks that apparently were driving around Chester and spread them around the county and drive around the county? Or let's say just around the areas where you had the service centers at, the 3 locations.
I do know something about some of the advertising because the Union Stadium, the Union soccer team did post a press release about this pop-up center. And it was on our county website, but the rest of it said you wanted to address any other issues.
I mean, there's pictures on the county council page that shows billboard sign trucks that are in the parking lot. And these trucks are driving around Chester advertising.
So the question is, why was there?
Why did we only specifically target Chester? Why did we not spread this out to target the other areas also? Like she said, there was obviously issues in Upper Darby.
The driving of the trucks and all that?
I mean, yeah, it's information that's, put onto the trucks, right? To explain and promote this, right?
I'm not aware of what you're talking about.
I'd like to see a picture, actually. I knew that there was gonna be something called, I think, a variable message board planted at certain locations around the stadium, giving people directions on how to get to the gate. It was not my understanding that there were going to be vans with billboards driving around, so I'm not aware of that information.
Was there something,
As soon as it's loaded up,
yeah,
they will provide that.
Okay. So we didn't hire any trucks to drive around the city of Chester, or arrange for trucks to drive around the city.
Not to my understanding, no.
Okay, so those weren't our trucks. Now, I think I said these.
Thank you.
I know you gave your name before, but do we have it, Maureen? Do we have it? Do we-
Leah Hoops, I'm sorry, who's the name? Hoops, H-O-O-P-E-S, 241 Sulky Lane, Chatsworth, Pennsylvania, 19317. Good enough? Okay, so just real quick, I'm sorry, ma'am, I don't know your name.
It's Ashley Lunkenheimer.
Ashley Lockenheimer, okay, nice to meet you. So I just wanted to bring to light, this is now the second time, I have been, insulted by an elected member, today.
I know.
Okay, well, a member of the council appointed, if you want to get technical, I guess that's how you got here. I am named on that injunction. I'm very proud of what I did. I take this election very seriously. I'm a committee woman in Bethel Township. And for you to say something that is frivolous is quite pompous, to be quite honest, and it's rude. I'm a voter, I'm a taxpayer, and I take this election very seriously. So and not only that, I was also insulted online by a council member who was here about 15 minutes ago. So I find this to be
just a pattern that is really needs to be brought to light, and that's why, part of the reason why I'm here today. So my question for the board is there anyone who works for, or at the voting machine warehouse on East 24th Street in Chester, Pennsylvania, responsible for emptying any of the ballot boxes or handling the ballots at any point in time?
Ballot boxes, the drop boxes that we
Correct.
discussed today. I think Ms. Jackson gave details before of how that works, a more full report. But the direct answer to your question is, it's not the persons at the voting machine warehouse, it's certain persons that are specifically designated to go around and collect those.
Could you just state the question again?
Anyone that works at the warehouse, so from my understanding, Jim Savage is working at the warehouse? Okay, is he at all responsible, or anyone that is part of that voting warehouse, are they responsible for dealing with the ballots or picking up the ballots from the drop box?
No. So Mr. Savage, I had asked Mr. Savage to deliver the ballot boxes, the empty ballot boxes, because they are housed at the warehouse, at least some of them. So he had delivered 2 of them to Subaru Park. But to the best of my knowledge, no, he was not handling ballots. He was not delivering ballots, but empty ballot boxes.
Okay, and I'm confused as well. Did Mr. Savage step down from the position and then was reappointed? Because I am confused, because I saw that in the Delaware County Times that Mr. Savage stepped into a certain position and then had stepped down 3 weeks later. So I'm
I
just
think I
trying.
know what you're talking about.
Yeah, can you
I don't
clarify, because I was confused?
I don't have exactly the specifics, but I
Okay.
think what you're referencing is, Mr. Savage was hired for that position at the voting machine.
Okay,
I think he may have submitted a letter for resignation or announced he was going to resign. I don't know exactly what happened.
right,
And within a day or 2 of saying that he was going to leave the position, he changed his mind and stayed on the position. But that was in like February.
I wasn't sure who was in charge, or if that was somebody who
There
replaced that position.
there was a point not too long after he first got that position, which I don't know if anybody here. I didn't come here prepared to answer this.
Yeah.
I mean,
That's okay.
at some point over the winter, when he first got that position, within a couple of weeks, he had said, you know what, I'm gonna do something else, or I'm gonna resign, whatever exactly he said, I don't remember specifically. And then in a day or 2, he said, no, actually, I'm gonna stay on. So that might be what you're talking about.
Thank you.
And that was a while, that was
Right.
before COVID.
Gotcha. Okay, before I leave, I would like an apology, because I don't feel that an injunction filed by a voter or someone that is a concerned citizen, that is a taxpayer, that actually pays your salary, should be insulted. Or whatever. I'm sorry, excuse me. Regardless, you're sitting on top of a podium right now, and you're basically looking down, and I feel as if I was insulted as a voter.
You should, let me just say what I said. Okay? I believe the law is frivolous. We have said repeatedly, it's ongoing litigation, and as Mr. Byrne has pointed out, so I need to be careful, because we are represented by counsel. What I want to say is, my personal view, it is frivolous. That the allegations, and we've had this come up from the board, this is not unknown, that there was not a violation of the Sunshine Act, in my view.
Okay.
And it is also correct that the first judge and the second judge, I was not there, Mr. Byrne was there, so he must
I read
correct me.
that every time.
Denied the emergency preliminary injunction.
So frivolous,
And very special instruction.
So just so we're clear.
I haven't done that in a while.
I wasn't there, and all the representatives, I wasn't in the courtroom, I haven't read all of your representatives. So it's my view that it is frivolous, that was not intended to be a comment on you personally.
There are several.
It is intended to be a comment on the litigation itself, put forth by counsel.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying. Thank you very much for your time.
But just to be clear, just to clarify, there was no decision made on the merits. When you have an injunction like that,
Is there not a balance?
whether they're going to stop it, there's not a determination made on it.
And from my understanding at the end, the ballots can still be challenged, from my understanding. Looking forward.
I don't know. I mean, get the answer is yes, I mean, anybody could challenge the ballots.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm Cynthia Long from 9 Cloverdale Avenue in Upper Darby. And, Mr. Rubio pretty much raised, my two questions, being the Dropbox and training. But I'm gonna go into a little bit, more detail about that. And, one of my questions is, I agree with him, we need larger signs. Who designs the current text and signage that's on the Dropbox?
Somebody on our staff, I don't know. Next question.
And did the board have the opportunity to see it and approve it?
No, but you have to understand. We don't spend 7 days a week, 24 hours a day doing more work. It's a lot of work. The staff does certain things and they put signage on. They thought it was appropriate. They thought it was appropriate. We've asked them if there's some complaints, perhaps it's not appropriate. We've asked them to take a look, and if they think they can do a better job, they'll do a better job. The board doesn't do. Mr. Byrne and Ms. Longheimer and I aren't out putting the stickers on the boxes.
Well,
There's only so much we can do. Okay?
sure. I'd like to, remind the board of the minutes, the September 7th minutes, 17th, excuse me. On the bottom of page 2, in the Director of Elections report, it says, good faith efforts will be made to have Dropbox signage emphasize one voter, one ballot usage. Now, I'm not an artist, but I made a little Dropbox here.
Oh, that's great. Let me see.
It's not to scale. I'm not an artist.
Okay. And where's the sign?
Well, the sign is, I'll show, approximately these pink highlighted,
And your point is it should be more on the front.
and look how small it is. It's
Okay.
9 by
Well,
9.
we're gonna take a look at that.
Yeah, I actually did the math. I measured out the square footage and the size of the sign. Each panel, there's 4 panels. 2 on the right side and 2 on the left side. And there's one in English and one in a foreign language. And, each panel is 9 by 9 inches. And then at the bottom of the panel, it's 3 by 9 inches. It says this ballot box is under video surveillance, counterfeiting, forging is a second-degree misdemeanor. Return of the ballot by anyone other than the voter is prohibited unless the person returning the ballot is rendering assistance to a disabled voter. So, just with this representation, you can see how small the signage about one voter, one vote is. And it says there in the September 17th minutes, good faith efforts will be made to have Dropbox signage emphasize one vote, one ballot.
I know that Ms. Jackson works very hard and she does things in good faith. And she's gonna go back and take another look at it. We're gonna see if we can make a better sign. Okay?
Great, thank you, I appreciate that. My second question is about the training of poll workers. I'm an minority inspector up at Darby 410. And maybe 15 minutes or so ago, you said that all the training was online. Actually, there's about 4 areas on the training website that are grayed out. That means you can see that something will be posted eventually, but it's not yet live. And those areas are election day guide for poll workers, election day processing and assisting voters, end of night procedures, and chain of custody process steps. So in fact, all the training is not yet available online.
So I'm happy to take a look at that.
Thank you. We were told, again, the September 3rd minutes, both in-person, hands-on, and online training will follow in October. Well, here we are, October 21st, 13 days from the election, and we haven't received training yet. Everyone I talk to is like, when are we gonna have training? When are we gonna have training? The September 3rd minutes actually says poll workers will receive information about available training in September. Well, we haven't. Also, what I didn't see on the training website is how to do a write-in ballot. Is that information in the training?
It was my understanding that it was already on the training website, but I will double check on that.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
I know it's in the video training for the primary.
And are you familiar with the concept of digital divide?
Yes, I am, but I do think that this is not an important,
Oh, okay. Well, you know, the digital divide is when some people have computers and some people don't. And I think that the election board, by putting so much emphasis on online training, is biasing itself against people who don't have access to computers. And can you give me a date for when the in-person training will be? Because I haven't, can you give me a date for when the in-person training will be? Because I haven't received any.
So the in-person training is only gonna be on the actual equipment, how to put the equipment together. So that's why we went to the expense, I think, of putting so much content online in hopes that even people who don't have access to computers could get in touch with people who did have computers, so there could be watch parties and so on. We were thinking that that would be available to people. The in-person training again will be on the, it's gonna be taking place at the Media Borough, Community Hall, I believe, and it will take place, this Friday, Saturday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, 90-minute sessions, and we'll be emailing information about that out today, and we'll also be sending hard copy mail letters.
Great, and then the last point I'd like to mention is, the text documents of the online training, it's over 11 documents, that's 170 pages and 8 videos. I don't have a printer at home, so if I need to print, I have to go to the public library, and to print at the public library is 15 cents a page. So that's 170 pages at 15 cents a page, that's over $25 to print out the training documentation. Thank you, now I have a date, now I know where to go, so thank you.
Thank you. And I think we have one more public comment, that's starting to last.
Good afternoon. I thank you for the privilege of coming up here to speak. My name is Donald Swanson, SWANSON, 22 Chestnut Street, Marcus Hill. I am speaking on behalf that I have over 9 years of experience working in the polling place. I am in Pennsylvania, I'm sorry? 9.
Oh, sorry.
Maybe that old. And I take the pleasure of working under the election judge of the polling place as a constable. I have never seen such poop show, I'm going to try to keep it clean, as I have seen at this election. Now, like I say, I have the pleasure to work under the judge of elections for the 4th Ward of Marcus Hill. My wife is a minority leader in the 4th Ward as well. The primary, I can say that there was an individual supposedly sitting in here or wherever watching as they counted the votes. As in history, I always do the last vote of the night before we close the poll, so I know what number I am. And to say, like, here I am, I'm the last guy voting. So if something comes up, I could say, well, no, this person, no, I'm the last voter. Now, the primary, I know I was voter number 161. I know that. Because my wife wrote it in the book, and my wife was just before me, voter number 160. An individual called me from here saying, you had a very poor turnout in your ward. And I was like, why? He said, there was only 60 votes. I said, no, 161. No, they come out and told me 60.
I don't even know who was it that called you?
The name of the individual?
Yeah.
I will speak to you in private with that name, okay?
Only was a worker, though. It was someone working for the Board of Elections.
A person who was running for candidate of a
watcher.
district.
A watcher.
A watcher, yes, and they were supposedly in here or wherever, watching the counts. I don't know how that process goes, I can only tell you what goes on in the polling place. So there was a discrepancy there that caused me to, like, what's going on? So I got more involved in this election process because this is the most unheard of election this year that has ever in the centuries that people have been voting. So I took an interest in paying more attention. Now, my question, and I was there Saturday and Sunday down at the First Union Park. On Sunday, I talked to the individual that was driving the vehicle that Mr. Gibney turned around and talked about. He said, yeah, he was sitting down there, they had to take pictures in front of the polling place because they had to send that and upload it with the vehicle, with the bridge, First Union, all of that stuff. And because they have to take at least 30 photos. Sound crazy, but he said 30 photos. And he also come out and said, I'm waiting on the other 4 vehicles because there's 5 vehicles. And I said, oh, we're driving all over the county? He said, no, we're only driving in the city of Chester. We are pushing it for the next 13 days in the city of Chester.
So I don't want to cut you off. I think we've already established that these.
Right,
It
okay.
has nothing to do with the Board of Elections. That's somebody electioneering.
And it paid for by the Democratic Committee. And it says not endorsed by any candidate either. My question is, now on the 3rd of November, I'm going to be put in a very, very difficult place because I watched voters go in at the Subaru Park. 4 individuals I know walked in that place from my ward. Those 4 individuals I know is going to show up to vote again at my polling place, which means I'm going to be put in a predicament that I'm going to have to lock this son of a gun up because he's going in, he's now signing another ballot because he's creating voter fraud.
Well, let me say this.
Go ahead.
We don't know what's going to happen 2 weeks from now.
Right, I understand that.
If somebody who voted at Subaru Park or voted in another place by mail comes to vote on election day, their name won't be in the poll book and they won't be given a ballot. That's how the system works. You can only vote once. You can either vote.
They got the big book that they have to sign in. That turned around and tells them who they are because they sign their name, and then the minority leader and majority leader write their names in the books, and they keep tabs of the number of votes that come in.
So if you cast a mail-in ballot or an absentee ballot, then your name does not appear in that big book. We call it the poll book. That's what that big book is. So someone who voted at the Subaru Park last weekend, cast a ballot last weekend, their name won't appear in the poll book. So when they come in to vote, their name won't be there in that book and they won't be permitted to vote.
So you're turning around and telling me that envelope has been opened and scanned and registered.
No, sir, on the outside of the envelope, when you have a mail-in ballot or an absentee ballot, on the outside of that envelope, there's another envelope inside, the secrecy envelope, and then the ballot inside. So the ballot's behind 2 envelopes, but the outer envelope has the name and identifying information of the voter. So when we receive that outer envelope back, before that ballot's open, we can't open those ballots till 7 in the morning on election day. But once we receive that back, then the person's name comes out of the poll book. There's another procedure. If we receive it back at the last meeting, we send a supplemental list of the people that are supposed to X them out of the poll book. But let's just suffice it to say, if you vote in advance, your name isn't in the poll book, or it's on the supplemental list to be removed from the poll book.
Which I have a question about.
Yes, sir.
In past elections, people that did the absentee ballots,
Yes, sir.
they were put into the folder of where that individual ward was. So if I have a gentleman, say, Mike Smith. He sent in, absentee ballot. Then on election night, when we close the poll, the judge of election opens that envelope, looks at the absentee ballots and records that in the book towards the amount of people that had voted in that ward, correct?
You're talking about under the old code, they would, did they record that in the polling place? I don't even remember. I think they did. On the return sheet, but not in the poll book, but in the return sheet. Yeah, okay.
Okay, so we're not doing that in this election. Everything is going to be taken care of
Here,
here.
the law change, correct.
Right, so all those envelopes, absentee ballots and all that stuff stay here. The judge of election has nothing to record that information because you guys are going to input that information, correct? Yeah. Okay, that's what I want to, now,
It's a
my,
minor and stuff, but the bottom line is, yeah.
right. My last question is this. Being a constable and working under the judge of elections at her discretion, I have to make sure that people that come in that place have a safe and secure and feel comfortable to vote. No, with nobody trying to get in their faces at all. The county or the municipality in turn put one of those ballot boxes at the front door of my polling place. So now you're asking me to watch that box to make sure somebody doesn't come in there and drop something, and then go inside and try to register to vote. Because now you don't have that information on that sheet because that individual just came there, dropped it in the box, then walked inside, and then see their name and write, correct?
Yeah.
Correct. I can address it. When someone applies for a mail-in or absentee ballot,
Right?
that, in order to get that, first of all, that application is logged into your system. Then we will process that application, and assuming that we agree that it's an appropriate application, we send that person a ballot.
Okay?
When the poll books are created, Crystal can talk to this because she's in charge of that piece.
Okay?
Created using the data in the Sure system. If that person hasn't returned the ballot back to us yet, what the poll book will say is basically a shortened version of, this person has received a mail-in or absentee ballot and they can only vote by provisional ballot.
Okay?
Okay? So if you're running the Board of Elections and doing your job, you will look at your poll book and say, oh, I'm sorry, I can't give you an election day ballot. You can only vote provisional. Okay? And that person will receive a provisional ballot. That provisional ballot will be filled out and submitted with all the other provisional ballots. And then after we have finished receiving all of those mail-in ballots and scanned them all in the Sure system, then we look at the provisional ballot. And if any of those voters who cast a provisional ballot are already in the system as having voted one of these mail-in or absentee ballots, then the provisional ballot is automatically not counted. So there's no possibility that somebody could drop that on the way in and go in and get an election day ballot and vote it on them, or vote it as a regular election day ballot, unless everybody on that Board of Elections didn't do their job.
Okay, so it used to be that you had the minority, majority, the judge of elections, and then you had an individual who operated and controlled the machines, okay?
And the clerk.
I'm sorry?
And the clerk. The basic judge of the basic election board is the judge of elections, the majority inspector, a minority inspector, a clerk, and a machine operator. If you have a certain number of machines, you have more machine operators.
Okay, well, that, nobody wants to come out, so I know there's a majority, a judge of elections, and that's it.
What we're trying to do is fill those gaps, as we were talking about earlier with the emergency appointments.
Okay. And we are using the machines this election?
We are using scanners and paper ballots, and there is a machine called a touch writer for people who want to choose
Yeah,
that.
I've been through the training class. I've been through the training
No
class
more
back in
voting
March.
unless you want to call the scanner that the ballot is read by a voting machine.
Right.
Or the touch writer voting.
So
No
the
voting
training,
machines like in the old days.
so I asked Ms. Jackson, so I asked you that The training that we all receive, now I didn't have to do it, but I always do it because I like to know what's going on in my polling station. In case there's an issue or whatever, I can say, well, I remember, here's the address, whatever. So the training that we got on the internet in March is still the same training going into this election in 2 weeks. Learning how to operate the scanner, what to do after the scanner, having a blank sheet of paper so they can cover it when they walk to the ballot box and drop it off and all that stuff. That's
That
still,
should all still be valid.
okay, so that's still the same training that people are saying they're not getting, but it is out there.
So, we recreated, we put a lot of PDFs online.
Okay,
Yes, I understand it's a lot of pages, but if you look at the pages, it's mainly pictures with not very many words, so it's more visual for people who are visual learners. But I would say that the training is actually upgraded from what they had at the primary, but it is all available online.
okay, because I was shocked at the primary when we walked in and they're like, no, we're not using the machines, we're just paper ballot. I'm like, that's not what I learned, you know.
There are some very well done videos on the equipment,
Yes.
how to set the equipment up,
Yes,
how to take the equipment down, how to use the equipment, step by step, pictures, close-ups, what plugs in here, what goes there. So yes, I think the training is actually really good.
If I could
Okay.
also address one point. Delaware County did not choose to change this. This was a state law. Every county in the state had to comply with the state law that required paper backup. We did not have a paper backup on our old system, so the machines could not be used.
right,
So this was not something that this board chose to do, county council chose to do. It was the state law. But county council, and by the way, the old county council, not the current one, had to pick which machine. But they, their options, you have to pick which system. So they picked a certain scanning system. That's what was selected. But the decision to change from the old voting machine to the current system was a matter of state law, and there's nothing anybody else county to do.
right. Okay. Thank you
All
for
right.
your time.
Thank you. Now, I didn't see any other comments, so I think we're done with comment. Does anybody on the board have anything? All right, we are.